Let's go.
7:06.
Oh, yeah.
At a public hearing before even what's sometime.
Oh, shoot. Yeah.
I didn't notice it.
I would have skipped right past it. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we'll go ahead and reconvene our city council meeting. Appreciate all of you in attendance. We do have agendas available on the wall over here on your left. You're more than welcome to grab one and check off as we move through tonight's agenda. Before we convene the regular city council meeting, at 6 p.m. we met and had a wonderful presentation from our power commission regarding rates and recommendations for power rates and rates, solar rates as well. And so we ran up right up to 7 o'clock and took a brief break. Our city council meeting will convene immediately following the public hearing, which is scheduled. And those of you that are aware, even though we're not starting our city council meeting yet, I'm just going to comment that this would be the time, this is the time and place for the public hearing for the annexation of 61 acres of property at approximately 1402 North Highway 89. Typically in our city council meetings, we have an opportunity for public comment during call to the public unless a public hearing has been specifically scheduled, and this is the time and place for that public hearing. We would invite any of you who would like to address the city council regarding this annexation of 61 acres of property to come to the microphone, state your name, and we do ask that you keep your comments limited to 3 minutes. Our city recorder keeps track of time, so when you hear the subtle beeping, it's really not that subtle, but when you hear the beeping up front, that's an indication that your time has expired, and we would ask you to wrap up your comments. So with that, we'll open the public hearing.
Would you like an introduction?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. We'll turn the time to Mr. Thompson to give us an introduction to the item that's being discussed tonight, and then we will open the public hearing.
The request is, we've received a request to annex approximately 61 acres of property. Property is located just east of Highway 89 on the north end of town. It's highlighted here on the yellow. They're looking to annex it in anticipation of developing the property. The issue at hand tonight is to review the annexation, determine what issues need to be resolved. This one's got a little more challenging than some of the annexations we've dealt with over the past few years. Just note that we don't have answers to all the questions yet tonight. You'll notice it's not an action item later in the agenda. The annexation does require a public hearing. We felt like it was important to hold that hearing, understand perspective on all the issues so that we can get a good answer to address those when it's time to be annexed. There was just set before you recently a letter from the applicant outlining a couple of their proposals. Again, we're not prepared to address those in any detail at this point. The issue is to identify what the pros and cons of annexing the property into Kaysville might be, and then the staff is prepared to go study those and come back with a full recommendation at a future meeting. One other issue that goes along with annexation typically is a designation of zone. So it would be appropriate to maybe hear comments regarding what the zoning of the property should be at this time as well. We do not know what the proposed project will look like. We haven't seen any preliminary plats or anything of that kind. So questions of that nature we're not able to address at this point. From the developer's perspective, they need to know what city they're going to be in, what kind of zoning they're going to have before they can spend a lot of money putting together a detailed subdivision plat. So the plat's not the issue tonight. It's whether this property should be in Kaysville or not and what issues are related to that specifically.
Thank you. So with that introduction, and for those that may have just joined us a little bit late, this is a public hearing for annexation of 61 acres of property at approximately 1402 North Highway 89. We still will have our regular call to the public later when we convene the City Council meeting. So if any of you would like to address the City Council regarding another item, you will still be given an opportunity, but this is not that opportunity. So with that, we will open the public hearing for the annexation of 61 acres of property.
Matt Yates, applicant. We just wanted to say we're really excited to have this this property to work on, and I read in the Deseret News this morning, it says Kaysville is the 23rd best city in the country to live in. And so this would be a place that I would love to live, and my friends, and I think it'll, at the end, if we're successful, it'll be an awesome project. And we do have the letter that's before you. We just have those issues we want to try to get, you know, some you know, I guess input on with, you know, regards to utilities and stuff, but I think it can all be worked out. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, thanks for your time. My name is Lance Munson. I live at 1298 North Highway 89, Kaysville. I represent approximately 10 other homeowners in our little area. Is it okay if I kind of point out where we live?
There's a laser pointer on the podium there.
Oh yeah, you're going to ask me to know how to use this.
Well, that's a different...
I live in this area right in here. So my house is right there. But there's several homeowners in that area that were concerned about this proposed annexation because of the basically what it's going to lead to and the type of development that we're looking at facing. We were given sorry about this. Sorry, just looking at my notes. We've talked with the developer. They've been open. We've talked with them a few times as far as what they want to do. They initially talked about doing some townhomes and stuff in this area. They've since kind of backed off of that. They're also talking about zoning as an R18, which allows 8,000 square foot lots. And in this area, half-acre lots minimum is something that is pretty much the majority. There's nothing that's only 8,000 square foot lots over there. The only people that I'm aware of as far as property owners in this area that have agreed to annex are people that don't even live in the area. There are people that may own some land in the area, but they're not property owners, or they're not they don't live in homes in the area, so they're not affected by it as much as we will be. I believe that the zoning allows for high-density housing in the area. They also proposed townhomes, as I mentioned, and they cannot guarantee, I don't know if they can guarantee that they will not put townhomes, and I don't know if we can guarantee that they're going to hold the land and develop it, or if they sell off to a different developer. As long as it meets the zoning requirement, I believe that they can put in whatever they want. So we're concerned about that. As far as the annexation goes, according to what I've looked at, the state code, I don't believe that it meets, that it's a continuous area, and it has to be continuous to the municipality. Definition of continuous is being in actual contact, touching along a boundary or a point. I don't believe it is continuous. They're bridging over Highway 89 to get to this very small piece as far as where Highway 89 actually connects to it. And the majority of the area is north of Kaysville City boundary there, as you can see over there. Oh, sorry, is that my timer?
That's your time.
How time flies when we're having fun. And it's also, annexation is also supposed to not...
Mr. Mounts, you need to wrap it up in the next few seconds if you can.
I will.
Okay.
Annexation will not leave or create an unincorporated island or unincorporated peninsula, which this annexation is going to do. Because as I mentioned, I live in the unincorporated area, and so you are going to create an island of where I live. So I don't think that it meets that either. So I believe that they should include all of it or none of it as far as annexation goes.
Thank you. Any other items for this public hearing? Hearing none, we will welcome a motion to close the public hearing.
I'll make a motion that we close.
Second.
Thank you. A motion by Councilmember Lee and a second by Councilmember Snell to close the public hearing. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. That voting is unanimous. Someone just mentioned that someone may have stood up. You're more than welcome to take a moment at the call to the public in the regular meeting, but we have already closed the public hearing. So we'd give you that opportunity if you'd like to. Since at the call to the public, you can speak about anything you'd like. We'll go ahead and convene the City Council meeting at this point. We'll have an opening that will be provided by Council Member Susan Lee, after which we have Boy Scouts from Troop 753 that will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Our dear and kind Heavenly Father, how grateful we are to be able to gather together as council members and citizens of this city, and we're appreciative of those who have spent so much of their time and efforts into serving this city. We're grateful for the citizens who are involved, and also for the many people who spend so many countless hours to make so many of the activities and functions work and become successful. And we pray that the blessings will be upon the many servicemen and women who are serving this country, that they will be protected as they provide the great freedoms that we enjoy. And these things we do humbly pray for in the name of thy Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Audience may be seated.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Lee and Scouts from Troop 753. Appreciate you being in attendance with us tonight and leading us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Before we jump into tonight's agenda items, we'll begin with introductions. My name is Steve Hyatt. I serve as the mayor of Kaysville City.
Jake Garn, City Council.
Dave Adams.
Susan Lee, City Council.
Chris Snell, City Council. Larry Page, City Council.
Shane Scott, City Manager.
Maria Devereaux, City Recorder.
Dean Story, Finance Director.
Andy Thompson, Engineer.
Lyle Gibson, Zoning Administrator.
Thank you very much. As previously mentioned, we do have agendas available on the wall over here to your left. You're more than welcome to grab one and check off as we move through tonight's agenda items. The first item on our agenda is presentation of photo contest winners. And to give a little bit of history on what took place, a few months ago, we extended an invitation to Kaysville City residents to participate in a photo contest. The entries, or those who submitted photos, would be judged by our in-house panel of photo judging experts. No? Okay. From amateur judges who liked the ones that looked the coolest. And so as we reviewed the submissions, we had categories in culture, architecture, and environmental. And so we wanted to present and name the winners of our photo contest. Each of those winners received a $100 gift card. And so are we presenting the pictures on the slide, or are they in the back?
I think they're only in the back.
Okay, so they're in the back, okay. All right, so they're on easels in the back of the room. If you haven't had a chance to look at them in the beginning, please do, because there are some really, really cool ones. But we'd like to invite the Well, I'm going to mention the honorable mentions first, and then we'll invite our winners up if they happen to be here, and the council can join me in congratulating them and presenting them their appreciation certificate. So with that, we will, 3 honorable mentions. The honorable mention for culture was Brianne Harris, honorable mention Bonnie Jones, and honorable mention Danny Anderson. And our winners are, for a $100 gift card in culture, is Natalie Clemens, architecture, Danny Anderson, and environmental, Jed Hickenlooper. Did I say that right, Jed? All right. So the 3 of you would like to join us up front. City Council will pose for a photo op and give you your certificates. So. I need to correct something. We have the gift bags for our winners, and the honorable mentions receive their certificates. So if you receive a certificate as well to Canyon Arts Gallery. Did I say that right? So if Bonnie Jones and Brianne Harris are here and would like to join us as well, that would be great. Give another round of applause. All right, congratulations again to our winners, and thank you to everyone who participated. We had over 100 entries and some really great shots of our community, and echo the comment that was made earlier of why I think one of the many reasons why Kaysville is recognized as one of the best places to live in America. Number 23, in case you didn't hear earlier. So. Next item on our agenda is officer recognition. Turn the time to our fearless leader, Chief Oberg.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, members of the council. I appreciate the few minutes you've afforded us tonight. If I could have Justin Stanford come front and center here. Tonight, I just want to take a few minutes to brag about one of our finest officers. At the suggestion of Council Member Lee, she came into the police station about a month ago with an article that she found. It was an award that Hometown Values magazine, if you will, awarded to Justin Stanford. And it, you know, our officers, we've gotten kind of accustomed to getting a lot of awards the last couple of years. We sent an officer to St. George to receive an award. The media has highlighted a couple. We had one in Salt Lake City, and we do our own award ceremony. But this particular award was just through a magazine, and there wasn't really a forum to recognize his efforts. So at Susan Lee's suggestion, we're going to use this as our forum tonight. The award, Lieutenant Pies has just kind of laminated the write-up, and I'm not going to go through the entire write-up, but basically it highlights what Justin does for us as a police department within our community, and community policing is really what we are about here in Kaysville, trying to connect with our community and partner with our community to prevent crime initially, but also solve it when it occurs, and we have to have that trust and that partnership to be successful in that. And I don't know that we have a single officer in the department that's been able to connect and become part of this community better than Officer Stanford. Despite not living here, he does a lot of things that have really ingrained himself within this community. It's youth and the schools and you name it. This write-up talks a lot about what he does as a DARE officer, and those of you that have been to one of his DARE programs have seen what he's put together. It's a pretty special program. He really puts a lot of his heart and soul into that, and frankly makes all of us look good with what he does to connect with our youth and educate them on decision-making abilities and processes and things like that. But he also does some other things that a lot of us really don't realize that he does off the clock and away from the department. He was involved in a play with our local theater earlier this year, and which was kind of fun because people know him as an officer still, a Kaysville officer, but he doesn't really come across as that typical officer. He's off, acting in a play, which is not what we're generally associated with. And even when I was trying to schedule a night for him to come to City Council, he told me, well, I've got a conflict. I'm in the Nutcracker play with Clyde Adams' studio now, a different program. So he definitely keeps himself busy. He's very engaged with our youth. Our trunk or treat that we did Monday night, we had 400 or 500 children show up, and I kind of walked around and watched as our officers engaged in the youth, and I just sat back kind of in awe as Officer Stanford was able to interact with our youth in a way that I would never be able to do personally, and it's those type of skills that I don't bring to this department. A lot of typical officers don't bring to our department that we really need and value, and for that, he certainly deserves our appreciation and accommodation. So I wanted to present him to you and just express that. You want me to make him say anything? Or?
I think you should. I've heard him at a lot of DARE graduations, so I know he's not short on words. So.
Yeah, you can ask all my students. I'm pretty long-winded. So I just want to say thank you. Thank you to the city and their continued support for the DARE program. I love this community. I grew up here. I live in Farmington. I lived there pretty much my entire life. I went to Davis High, graduated there. I grew up in this community. I love it. I'm so grateful to have the opportunity to be able to serve in the capacity that I do for the city. And just my whole goal being a police officer here, and especially with the DARE program, is to make the biggest positive impact that I possibly can with the time that I have, in this assignment and as a police officer. And so I do. I pour a lot of time. I pour a lot of effort into it. But it's because I care about the kids. I consider them my own. I go to their sporting events, their plays, their recitals, everything like that, to show them that I truly do care about them. And that's where I believe we're going to make an impact, and that's where we can impact our future of our youth, is by showing them interest and showing them that, hey, somebody does have my back. And, the police, they're not a bad people. They're here to help us and to serve us. And so that's my goal. It's been an honor, a privilege, and I'm looking forward to continually being able to do that in whatever aspect that I can for the city. But I just want to say thank you again for the support of the city and the DARE program, and also my department. They've had my back from day one, so very, very grateful for that. I want to just say thank you. And the citizens and the parents of the students. That's honestly, I tell them, I'm like, that's where I get my paycheck, is hearing from the parents coming to me, telling me how much of an impact I've made on their kids, and how I made a positive impact in their kids' life. That's where I earn my paycheck. And so thank you, citizens as well, and parents and grandparents and all that that support your kids and the DARE program as well. So thank you.
Still going. I just have to echo too what was, I think now for the past 8 years, if I've done my math, I've attended about 65 or 70 DARE graduations. And since Officer Stanford has been leading that effort, I remember the first one I attended, I texted Chief and said, I need you to call me about the DARE graduation. And he was like, oh no, what happened? And I remember I said something along the lines of, I've never attended a better organized, more sincere presentation, and have never seen kids not only look up to an officer, to be honest with you, but look up to an adult and a role model, as I saw in their eyes, and as I continue to see in their eyes at their graduations of Officer Stanford. And it's always nice when we have people that are a great example and give a great face for our city, but I honestly, genuinely believe you take that to a whole new level. And you can't fake sincerity, and your sincerity is very clear and is very inspiring and a great example to all of us. So thank you for everything you do for our community. We really appreciate it. Let's give another round of applause. Chief?
I also had planned on recognizing a citizen tonight, but regrettably he had to reschedule for our next council meeting due to a work conflict. So I'll be back in 2 weeks, and we'll talk about that one.
Sounds good. Thanks, Chief. Thanks again, gentlemen. Thanks for all you do. Appreciate it. Next on our agenda is County Commission presentation. We have with us tonight members of the Davis County Commission who are going to take a few minutes and give a brief update on the happenings of the county and share with you how you can reach out and communicate with them, and turn the time to the chairman for this year is Commissioner Jim Smith.
Yep, thank you very much. It's an honor to be here with you, and it's great to see so many of your citizens involved. This is different. When we hold commission meetings, we just don't have as much fun as you do because we just don't have this kind of attendance. So I wanted to just comment just briefly on why we do this. 3 years ago, I was running for office, and I had a couple of people approach me and say, you have your commission meetings at 10 o'clock on a Tuesday morning. We just can't come. And you know what? I went back and took that back, and we explored it. And I found out that some years ago, we had changed and did our meetings on a Tuesday night, and did it for 2 years. And in the 2 years, we had 0 people from the public show up because our meetings are just death-defyingly boring. We just go from one contract to the next, and yet it cost us a couple $100,000 to do that because we have to pay our staff to come and make presentations on all of the contracts. We just felt that was not a wise use of taxpayer dollars. So what we do is, instead of asking them to come to us, we go to each city every month. This month, we've actually gone to a couple, and just make ourselves available to the public, to the city council. Anything that you'd like to ask us, we'd be happy to address or take back. And so that's the purpose of our coming, to share some time. So before we say anything, let me see if you have any questions for the county. Anything from the city council? Geez, things are going good.
We missed you last time on our agenda hiccup. Other than that, no, not really.
All right. How about from the public? Does anyone have anything you'd like to talk to the boring city councilors? Come on up.
I think you meant boring commissioners, not city councilors. Just to be clarified.
Thank you. This is a great opportunity. Lorraine Kamalu. And my only question is, do you know the design of the intersection that's going to go in on Shepherd Lane and I-15? Has that been determined yet what that design will be?
The final design of that one has not been been determined at this point, although several in the city, in the county, are pushing for that interchange. I will have a first-hand experience because I'll be able to hit it with a 9-iron. It goes right through my backyard. If I was a good golfer, I'd probably be able to hit it with a 9-iron. So no, that determination has not been made on the exact format of how that goes. There were some earlier design that were rejected, and so we're just not exactly sure how that's going to shake out. It's more designed for going west than it is for going east. We have some pretty good access through right there where Shepherd Lane comes in. I mean, the I-15 and 89 come to a point right there. But going west, I know there's some, you guys and an unnamed city to the south, Farmington, have some real interest in industrial park there. So we know that we know a little bit about the general line because there's been some property that's been acquired and a corridor preserved, but the exact design hasn't been decided. So the answer is I don't know. But that was a long way to say it. Does anybody else have anything? Sir, please come up.
I always bore these guys, so.
Might as well bore us too.
Yeah, my name's Dean Wall. I wanted to talk about the jail and how they're dealing with county inmates versus federal inmates and how that's impacting that.
The question was on the jail, and we had, it's been when was it that the Rio Grande project started? It's been 2 or 3 months now. We were presented a contract from our county to the south that wanted to take some of their inmates and put them in our jail so they could make room for those that were part of the Rio Grande project, okay? The original design was for us to take 12, okay, which we did. We're up to 120 right now, and it's pushed us to kind of a maximum. Now, they're paying for that, and so the money's coming from Salt Lake City to pay for those. We'd like to see that kind of taper off now just a little bit, and we've had to make room for some of those prisoners, and some of those prisoners have gotten shifted north to Weber County as well. I think we're getting to the point where some of that should stabilize, but we'd like to get our room back in our jail because right now we're pretty much at maximum, okay? So don't know if that answered the question, but
I think the big thing on that is, I know that the federal government, you have house prisoners there,
right,
and they pay a lot more for that versus what the Salt Lake County or Salt Lake City's paying.
Yeah, and we didn't lose any of our federal prisoners, but you're right. If there were additional federal prisoners, we wouldn't have room for them right now. So, and as much as we love our neighbors to the south, we'd like to help our federal neighbors and put a little more money in your coffers, okay? Because it really is taxpayer money. Excellent question. Anybody else? I really think it's an opportunity and a privilege for us. Commissioner Elliott and I get to do all kinds of fun, boring things, although he's had lots of fun. We're working on, tell him a little bit.
So, well, one good news we got from our Public Works that I wanted to mention to you citizens of Kaysville is that we're going to be redoing Mutton Hollow Road. So that road is kind of the no man's land. It's part Kaysville, part Layton, but it's Davis County, and nobody seems to want to accept it, and so we're going to move forward and get that road reconstruction going in the next couple of years. And so I've gotten several citizens' complaints saying they take their trailers down that road and everything falls out. So we're going to get that fixed. One of the things they didn't tell you about when you get elected, that if there's something that happens in your portfolio, you become that acting director within that portfolio. Yeah, they forgot to tell me that. So I've been acting animal control director now for the last 6 months. Shane is on our advisory board with that, and I'm happy to say that we've got 60 applicants. Of those, about 15 are well qualified, and we'll be going through that and doing interviews. I did not know that there are so many passionate animal lovers out there, in particular cats. Cats are very beloved, and we have some great programs here in Davis County that we're still continuing to do. The Trap, Neuter, Release program, in which we trap the cats, we neuter them, and then release them back in the community. And then we also have a great barnyard program for those who do not want those cats to return, that we can relocate those cats in another area of the county. And actually, this last year we took a load out actually to Colorado, because Colorado can't get enough cats, apparently. So, with that, we'll be happy to have a new animal control director hired here shortly with Shane's help and advisory. And then other issues within the county. Your library has been a model library for us. We thank you for your guys' insight and direction on that. We're going to be moving forward in Syracuse, doing an add-on in Syracuse because of the population growth out there. And then Bountiful and Clearfield, they're actually going to be doing a redo as well. And we're taking the designs that we took from Kaysville and trying to incorporate those in those libraries that we're going to be adding on. We'll be doing a complete redo in Bountiful and in Clearfield because of the age of the buildings. So if you have any other questions on animal control, public works, justice courts and things like that.
If all it takes is 2 or 3 people complaining about driving their trailer down a bumpy road to get you to redo it, can you come redo Sunset and Shepherd for us too? Pile it on your budget.
Exactly.
All right. Yeah, and there's so many things we could talk about, but I noticed that you have a nice long agenda, and I don't think we should take too much more time. And there's lots of economic development things we're doing. There's things that we can visit with you about, or anyone, please feel free to call us and talk to us. But just want to express appreciation for you as a mayor and city council. I was one of those citizens back in the day that really knew that there was such a thing as a mayor, but I never really knew what a city council does. And I got to tell you, I stand in awe and appreciation for all of the city councils. You do a wonderful job. And there's a reason we have such a nice county, and you're the number 23 city in the world or something like that. It's great. And I live just that far outside. So I'm like number 23 and a half, I think, where I live. But
actually, Farmington was listed as, no, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. Number 850. But, okay, I live in Farmington, technically, but when I go to church, I go in Kaysville. So does that count for something? So apparently my spiritual life is dependent on Kaysville. Anyways, I do appreciate that. I always like to remind everybody that all of your citizens are also our citizens. We are working to help the same people, and appreciate what you do. And if we can help you, and if we can do anything to help anybody that would like to visit with us, we'd love to hear from you. So with that, yes.
Commissioner Elliott, is the Mutton Hollow, is that is it from 89 all the way to Maine, or 89 to Fairfield?
It's 89 to about 350 feet east of Fairfield.
Okay. All right. Cool.
It's weird. That church on the lower part is in Kaysville, but the corner house on the southeast corner is not.
Yep.
And so
I wasn't around when they created
it's a different
those
boundary.
boundaries.
And I only know that because when we talked about that new subdivision, we had to figure out exactly how much of that was.
And if we fix the road, who knows? Maybe you'd like.
Yeah, you get it all fixed. Maybe we can talk
maybe
again.
Maybe we'll annex it. Who knows? So, anyways, but thank you very much for letting us come.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Good
Thank
night.
you. Thank you very much. Next item on our agenda is declaration of conflicts of interest. At one of our past meetings, it might have just been our most recent meeting, which wasn't that recent because we met a month ago, but we decided to add this to every agenda. So at the beginning of the meeting, we'll ask members of the City Council to review tonight's agenda. If you see any potential conflicts of interest, we would ask you to declare those at this time. Hearing none, we'll move on to the next item on our agenda, which is number 7, call to the public. This is the time in our City Council meeting when we open the microphone to any of you that are in attendance that would like to address the City Council. We don't have any additional public hearings scheduled regarding any of tonight's agenda items. If you'd like to address the City Council regarding one of tonight's agenda items, this would be your opportunity to do so. Your comments do not have to be limited to tonight's agenda item. And so with that, we will open call to the public. Same previous rules of 3 minutes apply.
As you know, my name's Dean Wall. A couple of things I wanted to bring up. I didn't want to use the B word, so, you know, what was on your desk is, I don't know nothing about it, okay? So, but the other thing that I want to talk about is agenda number 13, the rezone of 22 acres at the property for Symphony Homes. I mean, I've seen their proposed layout that they have for that. Basically, I think, if I remember right, they're putting in 200 and something homes in there, and they only have one road that leads to a main road, and everything else is put back into the other subdivisions. And so I don't like the idea, even though I don't live next to it. I live in Kaysville, and I think it would be a bad thing. I went to planning and zoning, and I gave them my comments on that, and they still approved it to go before you guys. And so, you know, that's the way it is. But you've got my thing. The other thing that I keep bringing up is the parking permits on the streets next to the high school. I'm going to keep bringing it up until something happens, but I would like the fees lowered down. Okay, there's some people up there that can't quite afford that, and so maybe we could even implement a lower fee for some of those people, depending upon what their income is. But
you're talking about the monthly or the annual fee for
the annual fee for the parking permit.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
I don't know if that was clear to me before, but we'll have that conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I bring it up at every city council meeting, and
I'm only now understanding you.
Yeah, I'm trying to not use the B word, because I've used it once before, and you've commented.
He's referring to
the word bribe.
Yeah, that's what
he's brought us a candy bar. And he's called it a bribe, and I said, you cannot call it a bribe. Please don't call it that, especially with our auditor sitting on the front row.
Yeah, and I apologize because I forgot one of your members here, so I'll have to bring something for him later. But I think I got something that all of you guys like. But that's there was one other thing I was going to bring up, and I can't remember it. But you don't have to consider it a bribe. It's because you guys do such a great job, and I appreciate it, okay?
Thank you.
Can we go back to conflict of interest? Received this candy bar 20 minutes ago.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council. My name is Lynn Galbraith, and I appreciate this opportunity to address you. I am here, of course, maybe you probably already know about my passion of preserving history and our heritage. I should have got on the agenda because I've got so much to say, but I will go through this as quickly as possible. I am the chairman of the museum committee, and I'm representing them, and perhaps some of those will also get up and speak. I want to first of all thank this council. I don't think you realize you made history. 167 years of Kaysville and no museum until this council took action, and I really appreciate that, and so do the citizens. I appreciate Mrs. Lee, who has been helping us in our committee meetings and doing the things necessary to get it up and organized. You know, my presence here is rather ironic. 12 years ago, I stood before a different council to petition for a heritage park. And there is a certain council member who happens to sit on this council who was a part of that, Chris Nell. And that group unanimously voted to have us a heritage park. And again, I want to thank them and Chris for that. Now here I am 12 years later, petitioning the council to preserve our historic old, I call it City Hall because those of us who have been around always saw it as a city hall, and then it was used later when they moved into this building for a library. It was also the home of the LeConte Stewart Gallery. We should be very proud of that gallery, folks. He's statewide and even nationwide. He's a very famous artist. We are the only community where there is a museum honoring LeConte Stewart. So what I'm petitioning you for is the preservation of that building. We're not asking for the whole building. We just want a couple of rooms, one for the Con Stewart Gallery and the other for our museum. We cannot afford to build a building for a museum. We have to start somewhere, and that's why we would like to use that building. We are aware that there are problems with the building. Since our beginnings, almost from the first time we met, we have discussed three things repeatedly. First of all, the incorporation of the museum. We got some wonderful help from a couple of really dedicated individuals. Fundraising and the preservation of this building right behind us. I have been on the phone countless hours talking with people, well, architects, preservationists, restorationists, and also the GCs. Just, you know what I mean, the GCs, general contractors. They kept using that thing on me. I finally figured it out. About the preservation of that. They're very optimistic about the preservation. Even a church of preservationists was optimistic. As a committee, we're unanimous in using this building as a site for the museum. We're aware of the costs, but you know, when it gets right down to it, we believe the costs to preserve this priceless heritage will be well worth it. And having served on the council and planning commission and so forth, you can't kid me. We've spent money in places I think is not too beneficial, and it'll be much more than what this building preservation would be. So much still needs to be done, and I hope this meeting tonight is a start.
And Mr. Galbraith, if you could wrap up your comments, you're over time as well.
I'll finish it up, I promise you. I'm just finishing this up. Okay. We hope there's not a rush to judgment. We hope there'll be several firms that look at this. We hope there'll be public involvement. Give them a say in this. And in conclusion, not only is that building a priceless heritage, but will serve as a wonderful annex to the city offices. And so it's a win-win situation. So we urge the council to do everything in your power to preserve this building as a part of our heritage. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Any other items?
Yeah, I don't have a joke. Brig Lewis. When we moved to Kaysville many, many years ago, our utility bills had just a few lines on it. And over the last 37 years, those lines have got bigger and bigger and more, excuse me, more and more and more. And different fees start showing up. We might get even more creative fees. But how much money does Kaysville get from its citizens? My gas bill takes a 6% energy use tax. My phone bill has a sales tax for Kaysville. My internet provider has a sales tax for Kaysville. My electric bill has an energy use tax. This is in and beyond the sales tax that we normally pay for other things. We had a bond for a fire station a few years ago. The bond was paid off, and I have a question that did our property taxes decrease when that bond was retired? You can answer that one later. You know, I'm not too pleased with the GRC architectural firm. They like to gold plate things. But I heard last winter, when it got really cold in January, that some of the city councilmen actually had their hands in their own pockets. The lavish spending we can be generous with other people's money. Be careful. The master plan for the old library had a new roof, replaced all the windows, had seismic upgrades. It had cross bracing in the walls for a cost of $1.36 million. We now have a remodel cost for $660,000, plus now we have add-ons, seismic, windows, and some sheeting, at another $600,000 for $1.2 million. A new building cost $2 million. I think we should have extra opinions. We need not to go too fast. Don't do what we did on the police station. The last time we could get out of here, they voted something and everybody walked away. Now, I just need to throw something out here. The county commissioners are gone right now, but the most important person that we vote for is the sheriff, is the county sheriff. He is the most important person that we vote for. The second most important person that we vote for are those county commissioners. They affect our lives in more ways than we realize. But preserve the old library, please. Thank you.
Margaret Bruff. I wanted to touch on some of the things that's been said. I appreciate the council and your responsibility in taking care of our money. I think you're doing a good job of that. But I think you've got a second job that's important, or maybe more important, and that is to retain and keep our history and the things that are important to our history and our culture and Kaysville. And I consider the library or the White House of Kaysville. And the federal government went to a lot of money to keep that White House. And I think that to do anything but correct the problems it's got would be wrong. And so I urge you to do what you can to keep that building and improve it. Mold can be taken care of. And I'm willing to help anybody to keep that building in Kaysville and not tear it down or take all the rocks down and build it again, which sounds stupid to me, but I'm just a mother. But I just hope that you will please keep our heritage and let us have a history here in Kaysville. Thank you.
I just want to confirm real quick, sorry. I just want to confirm real quick that there will be no further discussion tonight on the annexation, or will there?
There will not be, no.
Okay, good. All right, thank you. I
You
just
bet.
thought people were asking stuff.
Yeah, you bet.
You won't start timing till after the introductions, right? Just kidding. My name is Caleb Stroh, and I am a resident of Kaysville City. I'm here tonight representing myself, my neighbors Greg and Natasha Carlisle, our community, and our neighborhood. I would like to bring to your attention the status of the Angel Street Creek project, and as residents personally affected by this project, we would like to voice our frustrations and discuss with you the following points. We are hopeful that the Kaysville City Council, the mayor, and Kaysville City public servants understand the need to complete this project as originally outlined, including proper removal and piping of the creek, backfill to the areas appropriate, and include curb, gutter, and sidewalk. Anything less will not be acceptable to us. The city and its contractor have infringed on our private property rights and have forever changed the landscape and stream that was one of the most prominent features of our properties. Utah has established the property right ombudsman's office to help resolve issues like this. With our direction, Kaysville City began to address our private property rights by hiring an appraiser to assess the damages we have incurred by this project and the impact it will have on our lives and prosperity. This process was halted on October 13th by direction of Kaysville City Manager Shane Scott. We feel in error. Halting this legal process will not be looked at kindly in a court of law, and we urge you to respect our legal rights and resume the appraisal process. We have an experienced real estate attorney, Paxton Guyman, who has been consulting with us and is ready to file a lawsuit on our behalf against the city and its contractors for inverse condemnation and other damages. Stopping this project and leaving the roadway and subsequent private property in this abhorrent and dangerous condition will not dismiss or omit the city or its contractors from negligence, damages, or your legal obligations arising from this project. The damage has already been done to our private property illegally, and we already have valid claims to pursue. We feel it would not be wise or prudent for Kaysville City to leave this project unfinished, and such action would be devastating for you in a court of law. We want to give you an opportunity to make things right with us first and hopefully avoid such litigation by resolving the following. We urge you to finish the appraisal for use as a basis in resolving our claims. We also urge you to complete this project as originally designed. We request that you restore and repair our properties as per your legal obligations and treat us as if this impacted your own personal property. As a community, we have tried to work amicably with Kaysville City officials, but to no resolve. Our private property rights have been infringed upon. It's our assertion that we have good legal standing for a case and are confident of a successful outcome. Please don't force us down this road to litigation, and please take us seriously. Kaysville City has a legal obligation to treat its residents fairly, honestly, and with respect for the law. We respectfully urge you to accept the recommendations above. Thank you for your time and receiving my public comment.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kate.
Hi, I'm Natasha Carlisle, and I'm the adjoining neighbor of Caleb that has been impacted, and my husband here is Gregory. I just want to finish up where he left off. We also wish to address with you the legal implications and the effects of Kaysville City's illegal and hasty implementation of this project. Kaysville City did not procure a temporary easement to start the project from any of the homeowners involved. Kaysville City did not allow for any public comment or offer any justification to the public at large before beginning this project. Proper state and federally mandated procedures were not implemented, and the full UDOT appraisal process was not applied to this project as it should have been. With reference to the above, we believe the following damages have irreparably harmed our personal private property, our community, and our fine city as a whole. The privacy we once enjoyed is now completely gone. We will never again in our lifetimes be able to enjoy a living green space as was the focal point of our properties before the project. The living green space kept down noise, pollution, and decreased energy costs for our homes, not to mention a full wall or fence to prevent any entry to our properties. We have had almost an entire year of unusable property for us. We've had to monitor water levels in the creek from time to time. We've wanted to list our home to sell, and we've not been able to because we are in this current state that's not moving forward. Caleb and my husband and I both run businesses out of our homes, and we have crews that drive trucks in and out every day. We have to make sure we have additional employees to prevent any accidents because we don't have a shoulder to go onto, whether we're backing in or pulling out. Also, one thing that attracted my husband and I when we bought our property was the fact that I would never have to walk my kids to school. I live next door to the school, and there was this shoulder that they would walk on, and then there was a crosswalk. So since March 7th, I every day walk my kids to and from school now, which impacts 20 minutes in the morning, 20 minutes in the afternoon by the time I pilfer through all the cones and cars and everything. So I appreciate you taking the time to listen.
Thank you. Any other items for call to the public?
Randy Von Bosi, I just wanted to comment on the rezone of the roughly 40 acres off of Angel Street. I think it's apropos with the comments that were just made, as much of what is happening on Angel Street down south occurred because new subdivisions were built without consideration of how kids would get to school. And the road process of beginning to talk about widening began because we were talking about sidewalks and how our kids would get to school safely. And now we have a whole new subdivision that could be 80 plus homes impacting possibly 150 to 200 kids walking to school every day on Angel Street. And I apologize, I don't know the time frame of when Angel Street is slated to get sidewalks, but we are now looking at putting in another large subdivision on a road that's not equipped to handle children walking to school. And we are an active community, and I believe that that needs consideration as we begin the process of approving more development, of making sure that we have a plan in place of when those improvements will come so that it doesn't get down the road and begin infringing as it has in the past. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other items for call to the public? Seeing none, we will close call to the public. Appreciate all the comments that have been shared this evening. The next item on our agenda is independent auditors. This is our favorite one of the year. Independent Auditors Report for fiscal year 2017. Turn the time to our representative from Hanson, Bradshaw, Malmros, and Erickson. Or to Dean.
Mayor, I'll give a brief introduction. With reason, this is the favorite time of year. I mean, this is the best report of the year. We've completed our financial statements for fiscal year 17 ending June 30th. And we've prepared our report. I'd also like to recognize Kemi Moss from our office, who is responsible for much of the report. As required by state statute, an independent auditor comes in and reviews our report and reviews our internal controls. And tonight we have Aaron Hickson and Rob Wood from Hanson, Bradshaw, Malmros, and Erickson to present their report. Aaron.
Yes, I think that the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, or CAFR, is one of the most underappreciated documents presented to you. But I do appreciate the opportunity to meet with you today and to present the CAFR. We will begin by talking about the Independent Auditor's Report, or the opinion of the financial statements. This is literally the only document in this entire financial statements that we can call our own. The rest of it is that of management. In addition, I want to highlight the fact that management does prepare the CAFR. Not every city does that. Many times they will contract out to the auditors or another accounting firm to assist in the preparation of the financial statements. And that is not the case here. And so I commend the Finance Department for this feat. The opinion that we issued is found on page 10. I don't know if you have a document and that you're following along, but it's at the top of page 10, and it is a clean opinion. It's the highest, if you will, opinion that we were able to give, and we did not modify it at all. The next section of the financial statements is called Management's Discussion and Analysis. And I really like this report, this section of the report. It reads well. It's not full of mumbo jumbo. It's kind of the Reader's Digest version of the financial statements. I encourage not only you as council and the mayor, but any citizen listening to me, to read the Management's Discussion and Analysis. It gives a great overview of what happened during the year in a financial aspect. And on page 13, there are two highlights I'd like to point out. And one, the city's total net position, or the equity, increased by almost $5 million, or a 3.5% increase over the prior year. The next item I'd like to highlight is overall, the city's long-term liabilities decreased approximately $900,000. These are two great points, and it does show that you do have you're great stewards over the finances that you are in charge with. The next section I'd like to talk about is on page 15, and this is just an overview of the balance sheet of the entire government. And it shows the changes over the prior year for your assets and your liabilities. Overall, there's relative stability, and there wasn't a great significant change in either the assets or the liabilities. On page 16, I will talk about the revenues and the expenses, pretty much very comparable to the prior year, with the exception in your governmental activities. There was an increase in your contributions revenue. In the prior year, it was a little over $2 million. In the current year, it's a little over $3 million. These are made up of developer contributions. As you are well aware, there's a lot of development going on in the city, and the city requires these developers to put in much of the necessary infrastructure and some greenscapes, and these are then given to the city as a contribution, which are then capitalized as an asset of the city. And that represents most of the increase for governmental activities.
In short, impact fees for the most part, is that right?
No, these are separate from that, but okay. These those are in addition. Those are other things that are required of developers. Okay. Impact fees are used for this. You ask them to give you money that you can then use for other projects that are needed because of the impact of that development. The second one in your business type activities, the Governmental Accounting Standards Board defines funds that have customers, or most of their revenue is through charges for services, as business type activities, and that's just because it mirrors, if you will, a business. The revenues were relatively consistent year over year, but there was one large expense, and that is the cost of electricity. It went up about $1.4 million. There's a lot of factors to this. It's not just year over year increases in cost, but you have a lot of growth in the community as well. But there are, again, many factors to the cost of electricity, but the expenses related to that went up, again, $1.4 million. On the next page, just highlight the assets, the increase in your capital assets. I just wanted to highlight a small thing, but I think it's a great way to show what a community can do and what the council can do to help, and that is the pickleball courts. I think this was a great cost sharing. There were people that wanted some pickleball courts, and they presented an idea to the council, and there was some give and take on both sides, and I think it's a great asset for the community at large. And that was one of the increases in the capital assets. I wanted to move quickly to page 18. This shows in a pie chart format the breakdown of governmental funds in the general fund for both revenues and expenditures. I just wanted to highlight that a mixture of taxes as well as charges for services constituted approximately 85% of the revenues received by Kaysville City. And sales taxes increased by to 9%. And as the economy improves and there are other options and stores and whatnot that people go and spend their disposable income, that sales tax revenue will become a more positive tax revenue. The last thing I wanted to highlight before I move over into the internal control reports is that of your pension liability. A few years back, the Governmental Accounting Standards Board was kind of burned by various cities throughout our country that were overpromising a lot of pension to their employees, and they were literally going bankrupt. And so they wanted and mandated that the unfunded portion of a state's retirement system be recorded as a liability on each city's or municipality's financial statements. This is kind of a weird liability because most of the time when you think of a liability, you think of cash outflow in the near future to pay an obligation, where this is just representative of Kaysville City's portion of that unfunded state retirement. And I just wanted to talk about that because for the year ended June 30th, 2017, it was recorded $4.5 million. They used various assumptions and a discount rate of 7.2. The reason why I want to bring that up is if those assumptions changed even 1%, if they decreased it to 6.2, your obligation would double to $9.5 million as a liability on your financial statements. If they were to increase that discount rate to 8.2, it would almost disappear and be zero. And so I just want anybody who looks at the liabilities and says, why is our pension liability increasing? It's based on a lot of assumptions, and it's just representative of the unfunded portion. It's not anything that Kaysville City did to increase the obligations of the city at large. I wanted to conclude by going all the way to the back. On page 109, there are two additional reports that governmental accounting requires us to issue. And this first one is a report on internal controls over financial reporting and on compliance with government auditing standards. And we are required to do various things to make sure that the internal controls, or how expenses are processed and payments are made, and how the receipt of money is brought in and deposited into the bank accounts of the city, and to make sure that you do have good well-designed internal control systems and that they are properly functioning. Overall, we did not find anything as an exception except for one small thing, and I will move to show you that. It's the very last page. It's on page 114. The state of Utah requires that every fund that those expenses be budgeted for. And the library fund had an over budget position by $50,000. This is not of concern for me as the auditor. It is a technical finding, and therefore I'm bringing it to your attention. This represents the endowment of the library. It was properly brought to your attention, and it was properly approved. There was a slight oversight in when that was approved to increase the related budget for that. And so that's it. That was the only finding that we had. And it's already been corrected. You may get a letter from the state auditor's office saying that there was this finding, and your only response is to make sure that you have a budget to cover that, and you do. So it's already been resolved. And so I don't find any issue to that. The last report is on page 111, and that's just your a report on compliance with internal controls as required by the Utah State Compliance Audit Guide. And in the middle section of page 111, it shows all of the various areas that the state auditor's office wants us to look at to make sure that the laws and regulations surrounding those areas are being followed. And we had no issues this year. And that is all, and I'm here to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Any questions from the council? If there are none, do we need a motion to accept the report? Just a report. All right. We like these kind of reports. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next time on our agenda is Old Library Update Discussion. Mr. Scott, are you introducing this?
Yeah. So our most recent direction from the council was to do what we needed to do using as little financial resources as necessary to make that old library building habitable. So we could use it for space and maybe have some access to the LeConte Stewart Library. And as we've gone through this process, we've encountered some concerns with the facade and other items that we wanted to bring to your attention so we could get further guidance. If the guidance is to continue in the same way, I think we've offered a couple of options. But I will maybe, if it's okay, Mayor, turn the time over to GRCA to go through specifics about what the concerns might be.
Sounds great.
Okay, great. Appreciate your time again this evening. Good to see you all. So as Shane mentioned, over the last 4 or 5 months, we've been working on ironing out the details of what this space should be utilized for and to what extent do we take the remodel progress as per the direction last time received by the council. So as we indicated in our report, we'll go ahead and start the slideshow if you want to go to the next one. So again, just a quick recap. At the council's direction, we're advised to use the most economical approach to this remodel. Out of the work sessions that we had with staff, multiple times we determined that locating the IT department in this space in conjunction with maintaining the gallery space and also creating a new museum space would be the ideal and most economical approach. We did identify in our master plan that the IT department was anticipated to grow and would also require some additional workspace, storage space to meet their needs. So again, just a brief summary, move the IT department from the City Hall, provide space for long-term storage. This would be administrative storage, secure storage that would occur at the north end of the building, again, in an effort to reduce and minimize, or well, I guess reduce the amount of remodel work necessary. Again, preserve the Stewart Art Gallery, protect in place with minimal alterations. Minimal alterations meaning minor electrical work and lighting upgrades to improve the gallery space. So just a brief summary of what this design work would entail. We've identified necessary interior walls and ceiling that would have to be removed for mechanical work, duct work, electrical work, so on and so forth. We've always identified, even in our master plan, minor structural repairs are required to the floor at the northwest corner that has rotted sill plates. That also needs to be addressed and would be addressed in this project. Replacement of the mechanical rooftop units, that was also identified as part of our master plan requirements. We have planned for that work as well as replacement of the existing ductwork to allow for the maximize the use of those new units as well, and also to maintain HVAC requirements are required by code as we adjust the spaces accordingly, as obviously it's wide open right now. As we create spaces, we also have to alter that, the delivery of that fresh air. Replacement of lighting and electrical as necessary to accommodate the new configured spaces in the building. And also, as I mentioned previous, in the north, I guess if you will, third, protect the existing lighting and electrical systems, again, to minimize the impact and cost for the remodel. Next slide. So to give you an update here on the floor plan, as I just described it, the, I guess as we're looking at this, more of a reddish tan color here on the south half, we have the Stewart Art Gallery and vault, again, as that would remain as is with minimal alterations. We've identified a space in the southeast corner that would be dedicated for museum purposes. In our findings, as we've worked through code requirements for upgrades to our spaces, we did find that we do have to rebuild the two multi-user restrooms to accommodate and allow for accessible access. The center portion here of this plan, as we create a new lobby, we also are proposing a conference room suitable for a 10 to 12 individual. This conference room would also be accessible off of the lobby, but also accessible from the staff side as well. So this would be a multi-use conference room, either for use by staff or by the citizenry or by museum participants, so on and so forth. The remainder of the north half of the building would then be established for staff space and use. So again, as we mentioned, the IT department is being planned to be located in this space. We have various workstations as identified, also work area, build area, storage of parts, so on and so forth, creating a standalone office space, a break room, a staff toilet. So again, staff does not have to go out and use public as they visit these other museum and art gallery spaces. As I mentioned previously, the north third or quarter would be dedicated for long-term archival storage. So again, we're trying to minimize the impact to the current floor space, but also creating new spaces that are multi-function, multi-use, and also reusing as much of the current infrastructure as allowed to accommodate for this function. So where are we at cost-wise? Our current estimate as it stands, creating what we identify as the architectural elements. So again, this is everything that goes into the remodel, including mechanical, electrical, the minor structural repairs. We have included and maintained contingencies. These are for the unknown elements that once we start digging into these remodels, we eventually will find things that we need to mitigate. We've also included, maintained some inflation costs, identified the potential contractor fees. The soft costs are identified here as well, and currently we are about $660,000 is our cost. Please, if anybody has any questions, go ahead and interrupt me at your convenience. Next slide. Okay, so as Shane mentioned, we have identified some of those risks already, just by the nature of the beast, working through the process. Right now, the exterior wall is composed of the stone veneer that has been attached and adhered to the building via the wood studs here. That has been the composition of this building since its construction. And over time, water has penetrated and vapor has penetrated, air has penetrated, and has degraded that lath that has been holding this stone to the structure. Also to note that this building lacks any structural sheathing at the perimeter wall system. So part of our master plan, our original investigation by our structural engineer, this was identified as a risk in case of a seismic event. So what we have proposed, a proposed action, again, this is one thought and one idea. We could potentially explore other alternatives, but what we feel is appropriate to mitigate the structural component and also allow for reattachment and secure attachment of the building facade, again, in an effort to preserve, is to remove that facade, install proper sheathing, rebuild the facade accordingly as it originally was. This also does affects another risk that we have found, mold. As you know, as the library moved out, we did have some concealed areas. This is in the original office at the southeast corner of the building. I believe there was a file cabinet here. As that was moved out, it was discovered that there was mold there. As we asked staff to remove this drywall so we could get a better understanding of what was happening, also please note that there is no moisture barrier on the perimeter of the wall. So again, as time has gone on, vapor and air has entered into the cavity system and again has degraded and allowed for a perfect environment, if you will, as We have warm, tempered air on the inside, sometimes cool, moist air on the outside, and vice versa. That creates the environment for mold. Also on the perimeter of the building, we have noticed in certain areas that there are larger cracks within the mortar, again, a breeding ground for moisture to penetrate the building system. So as part of addressing the structural portion and the attachment of the facade to the building by including sheathing, at the same time we would also add the weather and air barrier, which again, if it's new construction, we'd be required to include that as well. So again, that is an issue we want to mitigate. We also did find mold at the northwest corner as well. My gut instinct is that as we open up some other areas, we'll potentially find more mold, and again, we'll need to mitigate that risk. So, one of the items I brought to your attention in the presentation back in the spring and identified some cost as an option. Again, now we want to revisit this is the window system. Again, these are our original windows to the building. They do not have any thermal resistance with them, or minimal thermal resistance, I guess is the better language to use. As we work through updating mechanical systems and providing more efficient systems, however, we're still missing a piece here of not addressing the envelope as a whole. And these windows we've identified as a major point where we're going to have a trade-off. If we increase the building systems, mechanical systems, the efficiencies, we're losing that potentially in not updating the overall fenestrations of the building. So, again, this is still an option. We do want to bring it, again, back to the council's attention. Next slide. We have also put together some cost that would reflect these risks. So for the sheathing and the vapor barrier, again, this is removing the facade as it is. There's a couple options of putting back the original facade materials or replicating the materials in an act of preservation of the building itself. We've identified that cost to be about $469,000, just under $500,000. The seismic remediation, this is again tying in conjunction with the sheathing. We'd also be tying the truss system to the exterior wall system down into the floor system. Right now that is also absent from the building structure itself. So again, improving those seismic responsiveness to the building in an event. The additional windows actually is a little bit less than what I presented to you previously. Right now, to replace the windows, we're looking at about a $27,000 cost, just under $30,000. So in this slide and in your packet, we've put these two numbers together. What our current estimate is, as I've presented the floor plan to you and described the remodel itself, plus the potential to add the additional risk remediation, we are just running about $1.2 million. Now, again, keep in mind, this is information I'm bringing to your attention. We have not included these measures in our scope of work at this time. We felt it was our duty to make the council aware of these items so appropriate action could be taken. Next slide. So just to wrap up my update here, at a staff level, we did start exploring some potential alternatives. I have the opportunity to speak in front of plenty of councils and listen to citizen comments, and it's always wonderful to listen to those comments and feel the life that citizens have for their community and also for their historical markers, and I can truly appreciate that. Some ideas that we had floated around at a staff level and wanted to potentially either discuss further or table, however the council chooses to proceed. one of the ideas was to create more of a community-focused project. Now, we've identified in the remodel that we will be creating a space for IT, doing a minimal approach to remodeling of the building, but there's still some space in there that's really not being addressed. And one of the models that we find very successful in our work throughout other municipalities is also creation of multi-use spaces, not only for city administration, business, council, but also they can be used as a multi-purpose function for the citizens of the community. So potential to focus more again on a community-based project. And again, that would also include the conversation of the Stewart Art Gallery and the museum space that we have already started planning for in this project. So with that, there's a couple approaches here to potentially consider. One is maybe change the focus of the remodel work to not isolate a staff function. We like to try to create relationships within city departments. All too often we've noticed other municipalities where we have not segregation, but you have departments that are remote in other buildings across the city. It's always nice. It's a good exercise and promotes continuity within staff to have staff all located in one building near each other. It creates a better working environment for everyone. This is also an opportunity to give the citizens more input into the project or into the process. Part of this discussion, again, is going back to where do we go from here? Do we continue to remodel the building? Do we also look at alternatives to repurpose the space, or do we potentially look at options to tear down and reconstruct a truly community-based space that could potentially house this council and chambers, also act as a community space for receptions, similar to what I've seen this space used for over the years that we've been in front of this council and provided our services to the city. So with that in mind, I just want to briefly touch on some cost if potential for reconstruction of a new facility would be considered. Right now we are looking about $240 a square foot to construct a building, again, that would house the art gallery and also create the museum space, but also create, again, other potential flexible spaces that the city and community could both utilize. Right now, what I'm showing you here in this slide is a one-level space, approximately 7,000 square feet. Again, the idea that we're replacing one footprint with an equal new construction footprint, if you will. The additional cost for contractor contingency right now is running about a total of about $2 million. And again, this is a hypothetical to replace the structure. And I want to caution when we discuss replacing the building. Again, there's a duty of ours to maintain the heritage, and I want to make sure that in this discussion, if the council does choose to do so, that we take great care in understanding how we can recreate or replicate the replacement of the original library building, that it's not conceived as a work of modern style architecture, but it holds the historic value that replacing the building would provide. So with that, any questions I could answer for the council?
Questions from the council? This is a little different in that we're not looking for an action, so we don't necessarily have a clarifying question before motion, but attempting to follow that similar format, and we'll open it to each of the council members for questions? Start with Councilman Page.
Yeah, I just have a couple of questions. First of all, on the, how did you determine, I mean, have we really got into that building to see what the problems are? I mean, did we hire, for example, somebody that mitigates mold or whatever to examine underneath, on top, various walls? Like I say, and you did say this, there's a lot of assumptions here.
Correct.
A lot of times, do we really know what it costs to do something like this?
No. Again, from an estimation standpoint, there's two ways to approach it. Either you're going to assume that you're going to find it in 10 or 15% of the entire building, or you take an approach, a little more conservative approach, that maybe half the building has some issues that has to be dealt with in that manner. So to answer your original question, no, steps have not been taken to further investigate the extent of that issue. It would be advisable that if we do continue on with remodel work as we've described, that it be in the interest to understand exactly what is the full extent before, so I can come back and make an appropriate recommendation to the council. So.
Well, I appreciate that. I do know that I've actually talked to a couple of people. That's what they do for a living. Mm-hmm. And sometimes they go in and it's not as bad as they think. Other times it's a living nightmare, and it's completely out of the realm of what they anticipated, and it's just, it's kind of like the money pit. I guess that before the council could make a decision on this, I mean, this is something we need to look at, no doubt about it.
Yeah, I agree. I don't like to go into projects making a lot of assumptions at the behest of throwing money away at it. So.
Yeah.
Councilman Snow?
Yeah, I took a walk through the building just recently with Cole Stevens, and he pointed out to me the couple of spots that have been opened up in the walls and it's amazing how exposed that rock is, or how exposed the building really is and the walls are to the outside elements at this point. Beyond that, I mean, the seismic, in a seismic event, the building, it's my understanding, the building at this point, as it is right now, would be rubble in even a fairly minor seismic event. Is that
accurate?
I mean, I think there are always assumptions there, and I don't mean to put you on the spot on that.
Right.
But
I believe we identified once you get to a moderate, what is considered a moderate level of seismic activity, that building would potentially suffer great damage to it. And again, our goal in a life safety standpoint is evaluating the fine line of life safety, meaning that in an event, we want to design and take actions that allow that structure to maintain its shape and form for a certain time period to allow individuals inside adequate time to get out of the building before more severe damage or potential collapse occurs. And I just want to clarify on that, the exterior of the building, that currently right now the stone material is actually acting as the sheathing, if you will. It's taking the forces that are drawn from the roof and the floor at the same time. And as the slide indicated, and as you've seen personally, the extreme deterioration of that lath. Again, if you go and push on that wall, a little more force, and you could push that stone right through. So, in a seismic event, the fear or understanding that that block and stone would eventually pop off with enough force, and again, the building would not have any type of diaphragm to hold itself together. So that is the concern from a life safety standpoint.
Okay. One other quick question. I know we haven't investigated the walls that encompass the LeConte Stewart Gallery to see if there is an impact on mold, but Are those walls, I guess I don't know, have those walls had additional treatment over the years to preserve that room more so now, or do you suspect that those walls are similar to the other walls where we're seeing some of these problems?
I would probably have to ask Cole to give some input on this as well. He has a little bit more history with the building, but again, as you mentioned, maybe some over the years additional layers of paint or drywall replacement. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that mold isn't present in the cavity itself. I would bet that there probably is.
Yeah.
Whether or not it's made its way through the paint and the drywall is obviously should be investigated. So,
right. So I guess not even that room is necessarily preserved at this point from
no, and
potential
it
damage.
is something we've talked about at the staff level that precautions should be made and some additional investigations. If the art gallery is going to remain as it is and where it is, all measures should be taken to ensure it's preserved.
Right.
So,
okay, thank you.
I just had not to oversimplify, but if I understood everything from your presentation based on your recommendation, you're looking at $1.24 million to bring it structurally up to date and another $600,000+ to design the interior as we would anticipate for its best possible use or its most efficient use. So just shy of $2 million if I'm and then a brand new building cost is $2,086,000. Is that kind of the difference of what you're saying? Is if you want to keep the building, you're just under $2 million. If you want to raise the building and rebuild it, you're at $2.1 million. Is that
so? The third to the last page after we include the additional cost to remediate the risks. The remediation estimate, as we currently have identified it, is just under $600,000. If you add that number, the $584,283, to the current remodel costs, again, what I mean by the current remodel cost is reflects the floor plan that I've presented. Again, that includes replacement of the HVAC systems, electrical work, finish work, the two restrooms, updating those as well. So all the items necessary to make those spaces what they will be, that cost is $660,000.
So you don't add it together? That 1.2 is the total of remediation and what was asked for before.
Okay, thank you. That's what I wasn't clear on. That helps.
Yeah, right now we've only our current design reflects $660,000 from an estimating standpoint.
Okay. I don't have any other questions. Councilmember Lee?
Yeah, just a question about the mold on remediation for it. Do they usually have to take out the wood, or are they able to preserve the wood between the rock and the sheetrock or plaster, whatever it is?
My understanding is it varies on the level of activity, if you will. Minor activity, I believe, wood can be treated, cleaned, preserved, and reapplied. Again, we want to control where the mold is coming from and where it's being harvested, if you will, and that generally is within the cavity or at the surface where we have cool versus warm, and that's usually, in this case, the drywall. So my fear, well, I shouldn't say my fear, but I guess what I would anticipate, again, is if we start removing those pieces, if the mold is at a level to where its recommendation is to replace the wood itself, then that's something that should be considered. But we would need to provide some further investigation and input from a remediation standpoint to better understand what the steps would need to be taken and what could be preserved and what would not. So I hope that answers both the question.
Yeah. So. And I did walk through the building. It was open one day, and I was able to go in and look at a lot of the areas personally. And what struck me the most is how there was mold on the walls where bookshelves were and pictures were hanging. And I know that the Con Stewart pictures, I've already been told that they had found some mold on it. I don't know. Did we take those pictures off the wall, Shane? Do you know?
I don't.
Because I think
I've never heard that that's the case, but I don't know that.
Yeah. When they did a replica of one for the new library, they said that was the issue with it. And so that's what I was told.
Cole, maybe you could answer that. I know that we've looked in that. The only people that go in that gallery right now are staff members and some students sometimes. How much investigation have we done to the walls inside the gallery?
We've done a little bit of investigation, but not a whole lot. But that's the first I've heard of mold being attached to any one of the photos. The photos or the paintings are attached to the wall via a special tool that there's, I think Dean's the only one that has the knowledge of how to take those off the wall. So, but we have moved bookshelves in that room just to see if there's anything behind it. Nothing that we've seen, but there's also different building material in that room with the carpeted walls that weren't necessarily on some of the other walls. But I would suspect that the art gallery is similar to what we found in the southeast corner, where there's 3 layers of sheetrock. As we cut into the wall, there's 3 layers of sheetrock, versus the north end, there was just the 1 layer of sheetrock. So it's been added to over the course of years, with just layer upon layer. So that's the first I've heard of mold on
Is there any way that we can check into that and make
yes,
sure?
There is, yeah.
Because I had heard that when they did that with the new library and that replica that's sitting over there.
Yeah, we reached out to some folks to gather some information on what should the proper humidity level be for that artwork, because it is very valuable artwork, and we want to make sure as we do this that we are, illustrating everything that Scott mentioned, that we're providing an environment where these things are protected, as well as that moisture moving through the walls is also eliminated. So, but yes, we can certainly look into all that.
That's all I have.
Thank you, Councilmember Yarn.
So I'm not sure whether these questions are for JRC architects or just council or in general, but when we go into this, normally I'm thinking of terms of specific data. I don't have enough data on specific things, and it makes it hard to make a decision. In this case, I'm not thinking about data so much or additional options, although I like kind of the option we don't have costs on of maybe moving the council chambers over there. The reason I like that is because I really do think, it's amazing how you do time motion studies on interactions. It's not just, continuity, but when people interact in an organization and you have this cross-organizational communication and you're there close, you tend to have important conversations that maybe you put off or put in an email and you're not as effective. So I kind of like the idea of having the city staff together in one place. But I guess the main point to me is the question that I still have, and maybe somebody has the vision for this, is what is our purpose in doing this in the first place? So in other words, if you look in doing a new building, preserving the old building, is our purpose to obviously, we've got staff considerations that we need more space for staff. And in the future, have we done, like I haven't seen anything really that says, I noticed the new building would provide, if you have an unfinished basement, 14,000 square feet, whereas the current building's only 5,000 square feet. So do we have a need for more space? And one of my concerns is, until we define exactly how much space we need, other concerns too that are fundamental, and I share some of these. I was very much in favor of Heritage Park and preserving the history of a very fine community that I've been had the pleasure of being a part of for the last 30 years, raising my children here and everything. It'd be great to preserve that. So that's another objective. But what does that mean? For example, one crazy idea, I'll just throw this out. I'm not an engineer, architect, or anything else, builder. But it seems to me the distinctive characteristics of a historical building are its exterior, maybe the window, the architecture. It's a one-level sort of Rambler style on the front. It has kind of interesting windows, and the rocks are, it has a certain flavor to it. If you use that same sort of veneer on a new building, who cares about what the interior walls are? You could almost build a new building and have the veneer be the rock. we don't have any estimation on the cost there. But so I have a lot of unanswered questions, but I think the basic question we have to answer is, what are our needs? Part of these are value judgments of the community, preserving our history and how to best do that. Part of that is the museum, the LeConte Stewart Art Gallery, and where it's housed. Part of it may be the exterior look of the building. How do you preserve that and yet still have a building that's not going to collapse on all the employees who are in it when you have a seismic event and kill everyone? And you're going to have adequate space to run the city operations. So I think we first need to define what are those parameters going into the future, because I don't want to build 3 buildings. If we can build 1 building to accomplish all those purposes, it would seem to be more efficient. And I want that 1 building to last not another 15 years with Band-Aids on it, but to last another 100 years. So we don't have to rebuild it later. So it's kind of the fixed cost concept when we were doing the electrical presentation of, you need not only to look at the immediate costs, but look at the costs over time with what your needs are. I'm not sure that's been clearly defined, so I'm glad we don't have an action point decision to make at this point. But, I think it's possible that you could have a win-win-win where we address all the concerns, the valid concern for the culture of our community and preserving our history, and at the same time have a modern building on the inside that's safe, that is efficient as far as energy usage, is efficient as far as the operations of the city, and that we keep employees together. So I'd like to see a little more discussion, I guess, about what our needs are going to be the next 50 through build out 100 years as far as office space, how we want to design that, and then also address this other concern of the character of this city hall block.
Shane, do you want to add anything to that? Or?
Well, I think GRCA, just before Councilman Garn and Councilman Adams and Councilman Page took office, did a study. I think part of your study addressed, I don't know if it was build-out needs, but it was addressed future needs as well.
Correct.
But the assumption at that point was that the old library was in a situation where it certainly could be rehab, not easily, but easier than we understand today.
Correct. As Shane mentioned, we worked on this master plan for the city for a little more than 2.5 years. Again, we're still at a draft, if you will, of that plan. That plan highlights various actions and also presents to the council and the citizens what are the anticipated staff requirements going. I believe it's a 30-year look ahead, if I remember correctly. And in majority of those staff outlooks for city administration, again, the master plan also included public works and power and other functions of the city. But for city administration in this building, in our 30-year look ahead, we've identified what staff believes that those requirements are going to be. So with that in mind, the previous direction that we received, we had indicated that the library building would remain as it is. We were not going to include any type of actions to remove it, rebuild it, so on and so forth. We did present in that draft master plan an option to create engineering, a combined engineering and building department space. And also potentially for future city attorney and prosecutor. That outlook, I understand, is probably further down the road than is pertinent to this discussion. But we did outline those at the recommendation of the current city management at that time. And again, that's reflected in the draft document of the master plan. So we have done that exercise. We have not revisited necessarily those numbers for the last year and a half. That's been dormant in that time.
So if you were to translate that into square footage, am I correct in saying that the existing building is about 5,900 square feet, and the proposed new building cost would be 7,000 square feet? So a little bigger, but then with a 7,000 square feet unfinished basement.
But just keep in mind, those are. I mean, we've talked about a lot of things, and I don't want to derail us if we want to talk about that. But what we're mostly concerned about tonight is we've been given direction, and I think we allocated $500,000 in this year's budget in one-time fund balance to rehab the building. And when the cost came in at $660, it was a little high, but we thought, okay, maybe with some contingency money that things might work out pretty well for us, and we could proceed. Then with this new information, we just realized if it's $1.2 million to just do it at all, which I think is still a minimum. Of course, we had IT pretty excited about moving over there until most of these revelations came out, and we can bring Ryan in here and ask him what he thinks now. But so that's really where we are. Is we had a budget, we got close to where we thought we could do it, and now we don't believe we can. So is the discussion? Let's allocate 1.2. We're going to save this building. That's what we need to do. If that's the direction, we'll go for that. If the direction is to tear it down, start over because it's a waste of money to put 1.2 into a building when we can get a new one for $2 million, we can go for that as well. If the direction is we don't have enough information yet, we need to wait, we can do that as well. But what we've done so far since the county left that building is nothing and wait. And now we're concerned about the art. We're concerned about the building structurally. Waiting much longer is not advisable, at least from the staff level. So I think there's still a lot of things to work out depending on which road we go down.
With that in mind, I'll revise my question from maybe the most fundamental questions that maybe have already been addressed or thought about. And that is, if you, in trying to meet all those needs, does it change the cost a lot if, for example, you use this space in the existing building to expand IT or to provide more space to keep all the staff in one location, and you move council chambers and have a meeting place over there, the museum, and repurpose that so that you're not dividing staff? I'm not sure that we have cost figures on.
Probably not. I think we think it's a good thing, but you're right. I don't think we could quantify it at this time.
Thank you.
Councilmember Adams.
Thank you, Mayor. I think one of the coolest things that you can do as you travel back east or into the older parts of America or even the older parts of Utah is you can go and find what I call a resto mod, like in the hot rod world, but a building that's a resto mod. And not torn down and recreated to try and look, fake to the old world, but left alone and rehabilitated internally. I firmly stand on saving the library. I don't see any reason why the building needs to come down. I've toured the library too myself, and I'll be honest, I've got mold in my house. It's probably why I have a migraine right now. Who knows? But you know what? There's mold everywhere. If you have the mold testing company come out and they do the air test, they're going to find mold in every one of our homes. I took a look at the building. I cannot find serious. I'm not questioning anyone. The sheetrock that was torn out is gone, but I even had a piece fall out, and I looked at the back and couldn't find serious mold on it. I'm not questioning you, sir, but I'm wondering if mold is a scare. I don't know, but I think mold is easily remediable, especially if it's not growing immensely, like engulfing the building, which I do not see any evidence of. The art gallery, as we're talking about the sheeting issue, we can go the art gallery either way. If we're going to sheet the building, we're going to sheet the art gallery. We're not going to sheet everything but that. So correct. Either way, that sheetrock's coming out, in my opinion. Let's talk about sheeting, though. You said there are other options than removing the rock facade. My opinion, and the opinion of structural engineers and contractors I've spoken to, and they have the same opinion as I do. Sheet the inside. The cost to take all that rock off is just astronomical. We could probably find a sealer to put on the inside of the rock, of the masonry rock, and then sheet the inside. I don't even care if you want to use 5/8 sheeting, a couple more bucks per sheet, that's fine. Sheet the inside to grab your shear, and then inject spray foam into the cavity. And then you actually got a pretty decent sound wall for thermal issues, moisture issues, and structural issues. I'm not an engineer. but those are definitely what I would call some valid collective points that I've gathered. So I think there are many ways we can go about this library, and I don't think, in my opinion, I don't see it being 1.2 million. I wonder if the 1.2 million is because it tipped the scale of 50 cents on the dollar, or 50% of the cost of a new one. So perhaps that, encourages us to just tear it down and build a new one. I believe the best path is the path of least resistance. Shane, I believe somebody touched on this. Shane and Jake did. But what we don't see is the cost to, in one of the models, to gut this whole room and give it to staff. If we were to give that building to council, you look in here. This is open truss. This is airy. I think people would rather have a wedding in here than have a wedding in an 8.5 to 9 foot. I don't think it's 9. It's like an 8-foot ceiling in there. You just feel cramped. So I don't see that as being feasible. I don't see dumping, $200,000-$300,000 over here on top of that cost in that option to come redo this that functions great already. And I would imagine if we redo this, then we're going to have a lot of wanting to redo that over there too. So I don't think we need to go down those roads. Staff has already, you guys have done a great job with staff putting together a plan that shows that really only the IT is looking to move in there. And I think as we move forward as a city, we talked about it in our power meeting tonight, that we're going to be doing a lot of auto metering. And what does that mean? If our water meters and our power meters are all just done by software, we look at staff needs. That's actually shrinking a little bit of our staff needs as we go on and into the future. We're picking up an attorney, but other than that, I don't know how many more departments we're going to need to keep on building, and the city's nearing build out. I think there's valid cause to save it. I recall that I attended one of the meetings of the library committee, and a historical society member was there, and he led the discussion. And questions were asked of him about the necessary need of doing seismic upgrades, if that was required in code. I recall he said it wasn't, because if you're trying to restore and save an old structure like this, the rules are slightly different. I don't want to be, I'm vaguely quoting what he said, but I know that he said something to the extent, because it got the group really excited, like, wow, we don't need to spend a couple $100,000 on seismic upgrades to bring it to completely current code. So I think that there's a lot of stuff that we can look at. Like I say, the mold doesn't scare me, the shear wall doesn't scare me. We can shear either side of the wall, I guess I did ask that and phrase that in the form of a question, though, and I can see you on the tip of your toes there. What were the other options for the shear that you touched upon?
Well, part of that discussion was to reflect what you just mentioned, was trying to treat it from the inside of the building as opposed to going to the extent of the exterior. That would take a little bit more evaluation to ensure that in doing so that we still have a plan in place and details are appropriate that also, again, control the moisture issue. I guess I want to throw a little caution in the wind that treating the source of these issues is what the ultimate goal is. And again, further evaluation of how we treat and rehab the stone as it is, retool joints, fix the openings as they are. What is the appropriate method, again, to mitigate moisture getting into the cavity itself? If you think about it, when moisture is trying to pass from the interior to the exterior based upon the time of year and the conditions, it requires a certain passageway to breathe. If you don't provide that passageway versus vapor transmission, better term for it, if you don't provide that passageway, then that moisture tends to get stuck in the interior or vice versa. So we want to make sure that in that evaluation of alternate systems, as opposed to, again, removing the facade and treating it that way, that we take great care in making sure that we address the moisture issue itself as we work through those details.
My take is that removing the facade is extremely cost prohibitive, and it will probably hunch us down the line towards just tearing the whole building down. My hunch is we'll find something else to huck in as a wrench, not you, but that's my hunch. I think it's savable, And I think it's also safe to say, I'm not an HVAC expert, but the systems haven't been running fully over there. Nobody's been over there maintaining it, maintaining temperature, maintaining airflows, none of that nature. You would expect, I believe, or I would expect to see some mold in the building regardless. But when I went over there, we could pull back the photo. A lot of what you see in those photos, folks, is just a little bit of rust. Anybody's welcome. It's a public building. You guys can all go and look at your own will. There's really, you might need a microscope to see mold. I don't think it's absolutely prevalent. So, yeah, I'd like to explore more options to see how to save it, but in an economical way. I think once we get humidifiers and dehumidifiers, if needs be, once experts chime in on how to manage that a little bit better without ripping that wall off, because that over $400,000, $470,000 to rip that rock off and sheet it and put that rock back on, I don't find that necessary. So, just personal opinion, and just conjecture to state reasons why I think there is an economical route and a critical path to where we could save that thing without $1.2 million price tag. So,
thank you. This has been good discussion. I have maybe just one comment, and I'm going to maybe just qualify it a little bit. I've appreciated my experience over the last 10 years, and I've especially appreciated my experience with staff and the council. I'm still serving as mayor for, I think it's 60 more days, and I wouldn't let anyone get away with treating me other than the mayor for 60 more days. Fortunately, I have yet to have that experience, which is great. Was it 50? Thank you. Someone's counting.
Who's counting?
58 days, evidently. That being said, if we had something come up or have something on the agenda, I would not think twice about taking action, and I think that should be the case for regardless of the upcoming election. There may be half of us that rotate off. There may be, at a minimum, there will be two of us, but that we could see some changes. The only reason why I'm even bringing this up is because we actually did receive the very presentation that Councilmember Garn asked about at our last meeting in December, and it was long. It was good, but it was long and it was very detailed, and it made a lot of sense. But we didn't do anything after that meeting. We had a change in council membership, and then we eventually had a change in city manager, and we really actually have not visited that again. And so there's that part of me that says I think the council, if you want to take as much action. You can take any action. You can't tonight because this list is a discussion, but you can take as much action as you would like to move forward, to not move forward. But I think the question that Councilmember Garn asked is a very, very important one, and I think there's a whole lot of value in maybe revisiting that discussion that we had nearly 2 years ago and never really got back to. And so the reason why I made my beginning comment is because I think that would provide a lot of value for the city council to decide to maybe answer those questions. I think all of you have asked great questions tonight. I think we've had great comments from the public. I think there's a lot of value in re-educating the council. I do think it would be, no disrespect to myself or Councilmember Snell, I do think it would be a mistake to do that at the second meeting in December again, and then have potentially new council members come on and say, so what was it that because that's exactly what, and it didn't even hit me until you asked that question, you gave the answer. I'm like, that's right, we had a great discussion, but we never revisited it. So one recommendation I guess I would have to the council, this is not necessarily something I'm saying that we need to boot, but I think Councilmember Garn's question needs to be answered, and I think everybody who is on board needs to understand it. And so in order to understand it, I think we need to re-educate, but to re-educate an outgoing council, I also think could potentially be. So I guess my recommendation would be that the council's next step be to do exactly what and revisit what our long-term needs are and go into this project with that thinking. That could mean maintaining the building. I'd love to see the building stay. So maybe that means maintaining the building and having a long-term plan for something else somewhere when the time is right. But I think understanding the question you raised, Mr. Garn, is very important. So I would recommend that the council maybe ask for an update and a re-education in January, and then revisit all of the recommendations based on a clear understanding of what the city's long-term needs are. But that's just a recommendation.
I think that's a reasonable recommendation, Mayor. Are you looking for a motion on that?
Yeah, I think that's a great motion.
Can we say so moved?
Just because it was my idea.
I would actually make that motion that JRCA revisit their presentation on our long-term needs, including the old library building, so that the new council and new mayor come January can have a full education, as well as the community, a full education on and a direction, and come up with a direction going forward. I think that makes sense. Anyway, that's my motion, if that's clear enough.
I'll go ahead and second that.
Thank you. So we have a motion by Councilmember Snell and a second by Councilmember Lee as outlined. I got to go back to our new rules because I'm still used to the old ones. Yeah, each of you have, well, actually, and we talked about this a little bit earlier. I don't necessarily need to give everybody 5 minutes to talk. If I have a pretty good feeling that you are going to all vote in favor, then that becomes not a necessary step. If one of you say, I would like to exercise my option for 5 minutes, then we'll give it to each of you. So I'm going to ask, just in general, does anyone want to take their time? Because if not, we'll call for a vote.
I just have one question.
Okay,
quick.
We'll start with Councilmember Lee. You each have 5 minutes.
Sorry. The money that we've put aside for this, as far as if we wait and then we decide we can't get it done within this fiscal year, can that money be put into a fund that will still go towards the building of that? What would that do to us?
Absolutely. If it's not used, it'll just remain in the general fund. So we could allocate it next year and revisit adding to it or subtracting from it too.
Councilmember Adams?
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Mayor.
You're next.
Just 2 quick points. I mean, one thing I forgot to raise is in the plan to give that building to City Council, there was also City Council offices in that. That's just mere point of record. I'd like to state that. I think that's just unnecessary. I don't think we need them. I'd rather give them to staff. And then as far as it'd be great to get third-party opinions from contractors, mold contractors, general contractors, that kind of stuff, and maybe get some real-world estimates on what we're looking at here. So I think that'd be beneficial.
Can I respond to that question?
Boss is over there.
Sure. You're part of his 5 minutes if he wants to give you his time.
I'll make mine brief so you can finish your 5 minutes. I would agree with that assessment from a cost observation standpoint. Again, my estimate is from a cost estimator that we use frequently, and again, using current market conditions and his history and knowledge. I rely on him for the guidance in the cost estimating department. So it is not unrealistic to take the time to invite some general contractors and other individuals into the space to get a further understanding of our thoughts of the current remodel plan. Also discuss further the remedies that we've put forth, and again look at other alternatives when related to the exterior wall cavity. So those are all very valid points, and I would highly recommend that we take some time to do that.
Anything else, Councilmember Adams? Councilmember Garn?
No.
Councilmember Page?
No, we're fine.
All right. Oh, Councilmember Snell?
Well, don't forget about me.
You made the motion. So.
Having made the motion that I made, I recognize fully that this council's, if it votes forward, is about to, quote unquote, kick the can a couple of months down the road. But I think that I'm not a a huge fan of kicking the can on issues per se, but I think it's important. This is an important discussion, especially because a new council will be here in a couple of months and at 58 days. And they will have that opportunity, I think, and the responsibility to make the decision and the determination of what to do going forward. You know, and I've said it before, so I'll keep my comments brief. I mean, that old library building, I remember as a very young child, my mom taking me in to, you know, check out books and whatnot when there was only a very small portion of that building that was dedicated to the library. So I've been in that building many times throughout my life, and I recognize that that's it's an old building in Kaysville. It's one of those that's been there. I personally don't have the same nostalgic response to the building itself. I think the value of that building is especially what's in that building. The LeConte Stewart Gallery is priceless. And I think having a dedicated space in that or in a new building for a museum is terrific. I agree and would say that Davis High was a much older building and probably much more historical building when it was torn down and replaced after 90 years being in its location. Buildings outlast their usefulness for the most part, and I think hopefully the future council will take that into consideration as well as all the other factors, trying to make sure that I am for preserving heritage as well, but I don't think we should preserve the building. I don't think is what is necessarily the heritage of that. So enough said.
Thank you. All right, so with that, we have a motion and a second as outlined. We'll go ahead and actually, I just want to add one thing to what you mentioned. I don't consider this kicking the can personally. I think what's different on this issue to me was the comment that Councilmember Garn made about I don't understand what our needs are. And if this council had a full knowledge and understanding of what the need was, then I would not be in favor of waiting to January. I'd say if you have the information you need and you have the understanding, I would not be suggesting what I'm suggesting right now. So I thought I would just point that out. So Councilmember Garn. Vote, yeah or nay?
Aye.
Yeah, thank you.
Aye.
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 Thank you. The voting is unanimous. And just for a point of order, it's actually 59 days, 15 hours, 37 minutes, and 38 seconds. So.
There you go. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
According to Google.
Thanks, Scott.
All right, thank you. The next item on our agenda is number 10, Deseret Drive Parkway and Pipeline Alternatives.
Okay, Council, as a brief means of introduction, I'll try and keep it brief as we've discussed this previously and not go into too much of the details of the need, but only to report as reflected in the staff report on this particular item. At the last council meeting, after having a meeting together with the neighborhoods, we had what we thought was an understood consensus. From that, it was revealed that was not necessarily the case. In fact, right after that discussion, hopefully we didn't cause too much noise in this meeting. I met with some of the neighbors that were involved at that meeting to get some clarification on what might be some best steps moving forward. And with that, the process that you have here before you was selected in order to reach out individually to each of the owners that was most affected and adjacent to Deseret Drive. And part of what was discovered is, I think, some of the confusion on whether or not there was consensus is people were visualizing or had a different understanding on what different options actually looked like or may have meant. So we provided to them some pretty basic visuals to kind of help demonstrate what may look like based on the options that are chosen, and then ask to each provide a preference based on the options that were available. So again, looking at Deseret Drive, I'll address the first probably easier section, which is south of Brandon Drive. This portion of the property is not affected by the pipeline, and the strong majority and overall consensus from the input we received back regarding the two options to either move the fence and give the use of the property that's currently part of the parkway to adjacent residents, or to leave it as is and have the city in some fashion spruce up the space between the existing fence and parkway. And that was the overwhelming consensus, is to just leave the fence and have the city do something to improve that space. Just to, again, show what was distributed to the residents. You see the existing conditions in very basic detail at the top. A potential landscape scenario if the fence remains where it's at, where something is put in place there, or if the fence were moved. One of the big concerns and reasons that there was lack of support for doing this is a major trunk line for the Central Davis Sewer District and some of the manholes that are in play there, and some of the concerns from the district themselves on pursuing this scenario. So moving to the north section, there are 7 different property owners that are adjacent to Deseret Drive. This is where the Dominion Energy pipeline exists, and they currently have an easement through these properties. They've requested the option of possibly moving that to the east. And so we gave these residents 3 options. Again, the super basic existing condition up top. The idea of leaving the pipeline where it is, you'll have to excuse my labels, they're probably not that explanatory. However, I believe it was Councilman Garin that said, what about a hybrid option at the last meeting? And so the hybrid option was to just clean up the space where it's at, leave the pipeline where it's at, plan something to provide a buffer for the residents. Other alternatives that have been discussed, there's been some interest from property owners in the area of essentially taking over the space and doing what they want with it, where you would move the fence line. They would be able to put the landscaping that they desire on their side of the fence and leave the pipeline in its existing easement. The option 2, as it was labeled, was to leave the fence, but move the pipeline to the east, and that's represented by that yellow easement on the bottom. And again, in that scenario, they would do their own landscaping on their side of the fence. However, as you can see, it wouldn't be necessarily right up against the fence because of the easement. However, it does clear up some additional room for them. This is the drawing that's been before you previously that shows from Dominion Energy where that would sit and the existing conditions. So just getting to the results of that, as indicated in the staff report, divided it up by sections. It was staff's opinion that whatever treatment was applied, at the very least, ought to be done in block segments. Certainly not one house gets something different than the other from street to street, but between Old Mill and Lauder, and then between Lauder and Brandon, and south of that they at least be the same. So looking north of Lauder, the residents expressed their opinion that they were interested in what's shown here is option 1, and that would be to move the fence, give them control of the landscape area, and they would plant at that point. There was a comment, I believe, on the feedback that came through with that if this were unacceptable, I believe it was the hybrid option would be a distant second as an acceptable option. So that covers the feedback that was given again from these northernmost 2 properties. South of that, it got a little bit more diverse in the feedback that was given. In fact, an extra option was created from the property owners based on what we had proposed to them. So the property owners looking at that, one of them specifically said, I like option 2, move the pipeline to the east, leave my fence where it's at, I'll take care of the landscaping as it is. Within your report, the other 2 people that responded stated that they would like the pipeline moved to the east, but also to move the fence line to the east. So I call that an option 4, I believe, with your staff reports. I believe it was discussed specifically with Dominion Energy, and they're here also this evening in case there are questions of them, that would not be an acceptable option to them. And they could probably explain some of the reasons why, but it's a little bit more of the same. So if they're already behind a fence, and also have to move and work on easements. They would rather not still be behind the fence to shorten that description up. So there were 3 property owners that expressed at least pushing the pipeline to the east on this. I've since and recently been in touch with the 4th property owner, and they expressed that their preference, which was not in the staff report, was option 1, which matches the preference of the property owners, again, on the block north of it. So you've got quite a bit of difference on what was hoped for there, but hopefully that provides some, at least visual to the council of what people are looking for. It was staff recommendation based on the input provided at the time of the staff report, considering the interest of the city, the option 2 be considered along the pipeline. And what we're looking for this evening, in particular with the timing of Dominion Energy and their project, I believe they've already mailed out notice into the area that they're starting to move forward within Kaysville on the relocation of their pipeline. Whatever option is selected, there will be some things landscaping-wise or others that we probably can't answer tonight necessarily, but to have that direction that if they're to move their easement, get started on easements, and get that taken care of in time with their project. Other options where some sort of landscape element on the city's end would be necessary are not currently budgeted for or designed, but we would then have direction to move forward with those items to bring before the council at a later date with numbers and designs. And I think residents have expressed some interest in kind of helping formulate what that may look like if that's the chosen option to go with. With that, I think that's pretty comprehensive. I will simply state that I think the residents have felt that they've been able to express, but I know there are some here this evening who have told me before that they would be happy to share some very brief comments, should the mayor choose, if that feels appropriate. However, if you feel that you've had sufficient input, we're just simply looking for those direction and recommendation from the council. Thank you.
Thank you. Council, that is your staff report. Any clarifying questions from the council? Start with Councilmember Snell.
Thank you, Lyle, for the report and for the drawings. Those are much more helpful this time than just talking about option 1 versus option 2 or versus the hybrid, so thank you for that. North of Brandon Drive, at least according to the tally here, am I understanding correctly, you had 2 property owners that wanted option 1, 1 that wanted option 2, and 2 that requested the option 4 that Dominion Energy said that they're not interested in doing.
Yes, that is accurate. And since that report was handed to you, I have been in touch with the corner property listed as number 3, I think, in the report you have there. They've expressed an interest in option 1. And I apologize that it wasn't in the report. He had texted it to me, which I don't get that information instead of emailing it, so he thought that I had the information, but we've since received it. So it's a split on keeping the easement where it's at or moving it.
Okay, thank you. I don't have any further questions, Mayor.
Councilmember Lee?
Yeah, when I look at this, I'm just wondering why it's important for the city to keep the right-of-way if it's chosen for that option versus going ahead and moving the fence over and not having that right-of-way.
Yeah, as we've discussed it internally as staff, there are no known projects or planned changes to the right-of-way. However, it's just been a concern as the city's around for a long time and things change and come up that as soon as we lose the control of that it's very difficult to get it back if needed. And so it's the what if option that it seemed to make sense to maintain it. It's just in case if it were ever needed to get back. A conversation I had is whether it's free or paid for when given to them, it's probably not going to be free to get back because of the improvements that will be made within it that likely the city would have to pay for. which may be justifiable, but that's the concern, is there's always cost and process to get it if needed. And again, it is a big if, but that's the reason.
And then my other comment, I guess it's not really a question. Does it need to be a question?
At this point, it does.
It does, yeah. Okay, that's all I have.
Councilmember Adams?
Do we have to give the property away? Could it be done through an easement with an agreement?
Yeah, and we've looked at different options, and in fact, the information that was passed to them was essentially by an easement or a use agreement, so there wouldn't be a conveyance or deeding of the property to them. Some of the comments that came back kind of on that were, if you're going to let me use it, I would prefer that it be deeded under the risk that the city come and take it at any point. I suppose we could get very creative in how those agreements are written to cover some of that, but again, there was fear that if I'm going to pay to change my sprinklers, plant landscaping and sod and take care of it, I want it to be mine so that when that has to go away, that there's a recouping mechanism for the value that's been put into that.
And so who's the Dominion rep?
Mr. Nowers is here representing Dominion.
Well, what's your drawback on option 2?
The only thing that's dictating at this point is time. We have crews that are already in Farmington, moving their way north. We'll have more crews available as they're getting done on our first phase that's down in Centerville. And so they will be jumping around, and we have a contract out for them to go ahead and move forward. So the only downside for us on any of these with not going into our current position or easement is just the timing of getting it all done. And so if it can get done in a timely manner and we can get equal rights as what we have now, we don't have a preference, to be honest.
So you don't care about the fence being there or the sidewalk being over your line? That's all fine?
Yeah, that's fine.
Oh, all right. Thanks.
Yeah.
And then if I may, Councilmember Adams, just as a final to your comment, what I had mentioned regarding the fear of the cost wasn't necessarily unanimous, and so there were a lot of opinions on I'd be happy with it being deeded or I'd be happy with simply an easement. So that's just one expressed concern.
So does option 2, Lyle, is it pretty well about the best of both worlds, pushing that easement as far east, giving these residents as much more backyard as we can, and still, let me add to that, and still maintaining a park strip for the city on the east side of the fence?
Yeah, I think from the comments and feedback, it'd be difficult for me to answer a straight yes on that. It's very subjective, home to home and resident to resident. My feeling is that in either event, it should be an improvement upon what's there, but I'm not getting necessarily a feedback that it's the best alternative from everybody. So a difficult one to answer, I believe. If you were to ask property owners, I think as a city we feel it gives them more usable land, gives a scenario where we can take care of what they felt needs to be in better condition previously. Again, from the city standpoint, we maintain the use and control over that area for future possibilities and potential. And so the city looks at it as a good alternative, but I won't say that that's the case with every resident.
All right. The rest of it is more commentary, so I'll wait.
Councilman Gard?
So a couple questions. One, the hybrid option north of Brandon Drive, from an appearance standpoint, is pretty much the same as option 1 south of Brandon Drive, right?
That would be accurate.
And the difference between the hybrid option, because both hybrid option and the majority of residents north of Brandon Drive favor option 1, and both the hybrid option and option 1 leave the easement where it currently is. Is that correct?
Accurate, yes.
Thank you.
Councilmember Page?
No, I think all the questions, I don't have any additional questions. I just want to thank Lyle. I hope we don't have to pay him mediation pay, but a lot of hard work to meet, and I think the process was very well done. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Mayor, can we do a motion to get this moving?
That's what we need next, actually.
Well, I'd like to make a motion. I'd move that we accept the recommendation of staff on this and select the options that the city has proposed.
And I'll second that.
Thank you. We have a motion by Councilmember Page and a second by Councilmember Lee, as outlined. As opportunity for additional discussion. And Councilmember Lee just took a breath, and so.
Well, it looked like there was some confusion there.
Can we define that a
do
little
we
more?
need to define the options a little bit?
What staff recommended for each segment, maybe?
Yeah.
All right. Well, let me do this first, because we have a motion and a second. I'm going to recognize it. There was some comment by Lyle that some of the neighbors might be interested in commenting. I'm probably not interested in opening up another public hearing, but if you each want to take a minute or so, maybe if you have a clarifying question. We do have a motion and second that we've recognized, and before we go into council discussion, unless there's any objection by the council, we'll take a few minutes to give a minute to each individual that would maybe like to speak.
Can we do, which option, Lyle? Was the staff recommendation?
The staff recommendation was what's listed as option 2, with the yellow moving the easement to the east and leaving the fence.
And that's north of Brandon Drive.
South of Brandon Drive is option 1.
Correct.
Yeah, so they're labeled as different options depending on the segment. So north of Brandon Drive, as stated, would be the option 2 shown here. South of Brandon Drive, hopefully I'm going the right way, would be the option 1 on the bottom of the screen, leaving the fence where it's at and taking care of the landscape area.
So there would be uniformity, at least, from the street side.
So, yeah, the fence line would be uniform on the entire street.
Segments.
The type of landscaping that could be placed in it would vary, however. With the easement moved to the east, north of Brandon Drive.
Trees over the pipeline, right?
Correct.
And this is why I asked this question, why I asked my question, because from the street view, the only consistent options are hybrid north of Brandon Drive and option 1 south of Brandon Drive.
And I suppose that is accurate. However, the landscaping has not been designed south, so you could do something without trees along the entire stretch, and it would be uniform the entire length. However, you don't have that option on the north end to even put them there, so that is the difference in distinction.
I'll refine my comment. I just mean with the fence, so we don't have an abutting sidewalk fence, on part of it, and then a park strip on the other part of it, and
correct,
have that tunnel effect for the residents driving on the right-of-way, which they own. So
correct.
Okay, so getting back to where we're at, then the motion was to adopt the staff's recommendation. I think Lyle sort of just explained what that was. So I'm going to put you on the spot, Lyle, and say and ask you for a point of clarification. The recommendation was to follow the staff's recommendation. Based on the questions you just heard, please just summarize for us what that is.
So staff's recommendation, adjacent to the properties north of Brandon Drive, was to go with option 2, shown here on the screen, which relocates the Dominion Energy easement to the east, but leaves the fence line as it is. Also, staff's recommendation south of Brandon Drive was to go with what's called option 1. Apologize, wrong direction. Which leaves the fence line where it's at, and the city would improve landscaping, and that is shown on the bottom of the screen before you.
Thank you. So per our rules, we're to the council having an opportunity to comment, but we're going to yield a few moments to the residents, unless anyone has the objection.
Yeah, I'm Mike Birch. I know you guys have all heard from me a couple times. I've been probably the most vocal. Option 2 is not even on our radar. Can I remind the City Council, I know none of you were members, and the Mayor, you were not here when the road was put in. That 15 to 20 feet was put there as a buffer for the property owners and the residents. It was not put there for a right-of-way. It was not put there to move the easement back another 30 feet or 20 feet or whatever it's going to be. It was put there for a buffer when they built that road. When we moved in and built our home 21 years ago, we were on the dead end of a circle and a dead end, and it was great. Now we've had to fence down the one side The city did put the vinyl fence in the back, but it was given to us as a buffer. The original plan was to put a berm and trees. Option 2 does not do any of that, and that just is the easy way out. And I know myself and my neighbor, Mr. Williams, that takes up half of my usable space in my backyard if I still have to plant trees that far into my backyard. That's my only level spot because they slope back down. So if I have to plant trees there, I take up all the usable flat space in my backyard that I can play yard games or have a gathering or possibly a future wedding or something to that effect. So option 2 to me is not even a consideration, and I don't know, it certainly wasn't the majority, so I don't know where that came from as being the recommendation, other than it's going to be cheaper if the city doesn't have to plant trees out in that parkway and use the hybrid option, which would make it uniform down. And again, I remind you that it was as a buffer to us who had existing homes before the road was even planned. Thank you.
Mayor Hyatt, would it be appropriate to make a substitute motion?
It would be when we're done with this. Right.
Is it okay to comment on his comment?
No, I think maybe just jot down if you want to address his comment at the conclusion of this opportunity, but to try and keep it efficient, we'll let those who would like to speak, cool. And then come back to the council.
Good idea.
Just the same thing here. Sorry.
No, if you'll just state your name for us.
Just the same thing. I remember way back when we...
Will you state your name for us, please?
Joanne Williams.
Thanks, Joanne.
I'm a neighbor to the Birches. Anyway, originally when we put that fence in, that we were promised. Tri-City originally had trees that they put in there as a buffer. But it's true, originally, and if you go back, you will see that we were promised a berm with trees because we have no really any screen from that road and the city building and the property that's right there and as it transitions into Tri-City. And so that's the originals to create that buffer because our yards are right there and it's only gotten noisier and busier. And so my concern is that I need a screen, both visually and the hearing, so that we don't have that right there. And if the road continues to get busier, which we plan on that being the case, we really need that. And like I said, I urge you to go back and look. You can go back and look when that tape took place and see that was the original idea.
Thank you.
My name's Keith Arbin. I'm on 769 Lauder Drive, so just across from the Birches. I don't know where option 2 came in because that was never all the meetings I've attended that was ever brought up. Option 1, to me, again, I've only been there for almost 8 years now, but again, I've got Tri-City trucks at 2 to 4 in the morning idling out there that if you take away a way that I can put a buffer out there, I'll sell the house. I mean, it's just to go through as much as we've gone through to get to this point and not address what we've asked for, to me, is just a waste of everyone's time because that doesn't do a thing. It makes it easy for the city to get away and have it be consistent down there, but it doesn't address all of us residents along there that are dealing with all the traffic and everything else that goes up and down that street, from Boondocks closing at midnight to Tri-City's trucks coming in from 2 and 4 in the morning with their reefers going and everything else. So, option 1 up there.
Thank you.
Joy Birch. My husband has already talked about this. I just want to make it clear that the idea to have the land deeded over to us was not out of, I want more land. I want more stuff to take care of. It was honestly to get that berm, to get it taken care of, and I can't see the logic of the city taking care of 15 feet wide by a mile long stretch of grass, trees, plumbing that has to go in there when it seems so obvious that each resident that backs up to this can have that option, can take over that. So if the easement stays the same place, the fence is moved, I take on the burden from the city of taking care of that property instead of pawning it off on the city for how many years? When that buffer was promised us so many years ago, and it hasn't been upkept, even all the way down the whole mile long has not been kept up. Tri-City has done 2 blocks, and the 3rd block holes. They have not put trees. So nobody's had the buffer. The idea to keep the pipeline in my yard, fantastic, marvelous. If I can have some privacy. We are surrounded by 3 streets, Deseret, Lauder, and Marie Circle. And if we could get privacy from the city, that would be easy peasy to let you guys handle it, to let the city take over and do it. But it doesn't make any sense for me to say, oh yeah, you got to take care of that part of the yard that gives me the buffer, when I can take care of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? All right. We'll come back to the City Council. We do have a motion and a second. I think there might be a point of order that Councilmember Garn would like to, and so I'd like to recognize that if you'd like to make a substitute motion before we move into that discussion.
I'd like to offer a substitute motion that north of Brandon Drive, the hybrid option be adopted, and south of, consistent with the first motion, that south of Brandon Drive, option 1 be selected.
Okay, so we have a substitute motion. Is there a second to that substitute motion?
I will second that.
Okay, so we have a substitute motion by Councilmember Garn and a second by Councilmember Snell. Now additional discussion by the council. You each have 5 minutes. Councilmember Lee.
Yeah, I think what in the comments, I do like the fact that there is an option to move the fence and allow the neighbors to take care of that strip. Less for the city to worry about, but I know that's not what was put in the option, or that was not the option that was picked. But with that being said, with the city taking care of it instead of Tri-City Nursery, it should take care of the issues as far as not being taken care of. I do like the fact that it would be uniform going down the street for aesthetics. Just yeah, that's all the comments I have right now.
Councilmember Adams.
I hope you guys can all understand. There's nobody trying to gives one something and another not. So understand that the position that we're in here, the way I see it anyway, as this council member sees it, is we also represent the entire city, and this technically is their property. So we've got to do our best to listen to you, and you got to hear us out. I heard you out. That's their property. And I'm not doubting the agreement. I don't need to go look it up. I believe on the words of the 2 of you who have testified tonight that there's an agreement to do a berm and those kind of things. I don't need to look it up. I believe in your words. So, but we also have to realize that if we put it all the way up to the sidewalk, we've already had comments, and this council member didn't vote for it. We've already had comments on the south end of Deseret Drive as to why is there no buffer between the sidewalk and why is there no park strip on the city's installed fence that just got put in a month ago. So those comments have already come. I believe in a park strip. So I want you to understand me clearly. I'm going to speak to all you guys so you understand me. I'm not voting against you. I'm trying to find a happy medium on the issue. Right now you have a 15-foot wide strip. This council member is willing to negotiate that 15-foot wide strip. You give me 4 feet of it, I'll give you the rest. Okay? That's the way I see it. Give us our park strip so that we can maintain uniform right-of-ways. You take the rest. Now, there's another option here to where I feel like some of you folks might feel like the people south of you are getting more than you. I don't ever like a lack of fairness, or at least trying to create fairness. We could potentially explore, if we're going to buy trees south of you and put it into our park strip, which would be our tree, well, yeah, trees can go there. Maybe we could explore, maybe we could take our buying power to Tri-City. Tri-City's been in this game with us for a long time on that piece of land, and get a deal on some trees. Maybe we buy them all in one bulk buy, and we find some wholesale year-end trees, and maybe we buy trees for your backyard. I know that doesn't solve all your problems, but maybe it's, you know, some 3-inch ball and burlap. I'm not talking your Walmart that are going to snap. Some real trees that already have girth and growth. You know, maybe that's an option. But where I'm stuck is giving away the park strip. Just a 4-footer, not the 15. Please understand that. And then we can grass that and mow it because we can't put trees in it. Are shrubs allowed at all? Minor shrubs? Cole's going to kill me for saying that, so I probably don't even need to ask.
Over the pipeline?
That's for Dominion.
Yeah, Dominion.
In your easement?
Yeah, we would allow, depending on what option you take, if we don't do option 2, we're into their yards and you guys can do whatever you want outside of our easement.
I mean option 2.
So if you're in option 2, yeah, we would allow shrubs.
Okay.
However, landscape, we just don't allow deep-rooted trees.
Yeah. So we could do some things, you know, and then maybe these folks south of it, I mean, I'm not so concerned about the uniformity of the tree, I just want the park strip. I don't want the road to feel like a tunnel. Maybe there's an exploratory way to look at taking the buying power of buying, you know, how many trees is that? 400 or 500 trees, Cole? 300-400 trees? I don't know. All the way down the run. So I don't know. But then we're in predicaments elsewhere where private property owners are going to say, we heard tonight, you know, and they're going to say, hey, you came and trashed our property and you didn't give us a fair appraisal price and you harmed our property. And then you go over and you buy these guys mature trees. It's just never a balance. But please understand, that right-of-way currently is owned by the residents. Correct me if I'm wrong. So that's where I'm at. I think there's a way to find a win-win in the middle here. I know you guys want that fence to go all the way out. Just if you give me 4 feet.
Can I speak again?
Boss man's over there.
Yeah, go ahead. Really
Okay.
briefly, if you're answering his question.
That distant second option of the hybrid option is by far better option than moving that pipeline. Keeping the easement right where it is and giving us trees on the outside of the fence is a better option than no trees. And moving the pipeline, okay?
Clarify one more time, will you? So leave the pipeline in your yard.
Leave the pipeline
Leave
right
it alone.
smack in my middle of your yard. I'm fine.
And then where
And the city take care of trees on the other side.
does the 15-foot shrink in your mind? I just want to be really crystal clear with you. Or leave the 15-foot.
No, 15 feet. The fence can be put back because they're going to, Dominion will have to move the fence for their work. But the fence can be put back up right where it is, and the 15 feet, fine. It's the hybrid option, I believe, right?
Yes.
That is far better option than option 2. Option 2 is horrible.
Well, you satisfy me because you are giving me my park strip. I'm sorry to speak in first person, folks. I represent you all, so I'm trying to. When I say me, I mean the taxpayer. You're giving the taxpayer their park strip. And I kind of was willing to even explore figuring out how to cover some cost of trees for you guys if your neighbors south of you are getting them, and the only differential there was private property versus public property, but they get them, you don't. So that wipes out a few of my concerns.
It's just the amount of trees I would like compared to what the city
want
would
a
like.
park strip.
So, you know.
I know Tri-City. If these guys will allow me to go over and talk to them, they're good friends of mine. I'll work a deal.
Thank you.
Well, let me help mend.
Councilmember Garn.
Yeah, I think the residents have expressed most of what I think and what I thought last time. There are a few issues, but this is one of these issues that I'm super clear on, that I don't have any doubts about the substitute motion. And the reason is, number one, well, maybe not the preferred option. I think if I was the property owner, I would prefer moving the fence up to and just taking care of the trees, making sure they're there, that the former promises that were that were made before but not fulfilled, if they control it, they can make sure that that happens. But essentially, the hybrid option takes care of that. And I think you could control costs, because once you have your fixed costs of the sprinkler lines in, and if you zero-scape the rest so you don't, weed control, that sort of thing, you've got the initial cost of putting in some, or even drought-resistant trees. There's some trees on the DNR corridor that are very nice, nice trees, and they don't need much water at all. It's amazing that they survive. I don't think they get watered at all.
They actually do. If you're talking about the ones by Smiths, we do.
The ones by Smiths, but the one right in my backyard that's over the fence, somehow it survives. But I mean, limited water, and you could have trees there. So I guess the thing I like about it, in addition to taking care of this concern of the buffer finally and cleaning that up, is the outside. Everyone driving by. I mean, you have a beautiful city, and now instead of, you have mulch and gravel in one place under option 2, I believe, but then you don't, the whole rest of the way you have trees south of Brendan Drive, so it's inconsistent. How nice it would be to have that park strip be consistent all the way down. How beautiful that would be for people breaking up maybe the monotony of driving down Deseret Drive. So that's part of it. I am persuaded a little. My mother was an artist, so I am persuaded a little bit by aesthetics. And then the last thing is that I lost my train of thought, other than just the consistency. But there's one other thing that I think is really good about that, and it was so good that I forgot it.
I forgot my supportive comment to your comment too. I'm trying to pull it back, but could we? Are people on North?
Councilmember Rand,
oh yeah, sorry. I was going to ask for permission to do that.
Are you done, Councilmember Garn?
Yes.
Councilmember Page. We'll come back.
Yeah, I'd just like to say I'm not in favor of moving that fence either. I really agree with Jake over here on exactly the consistency of it. I think that's good. It is going to be an expense to the city. There's no doubt about that. But I don't know. Maybe that's the best way. And if the city has committed in the past and it definitely hasn't taken place, maybe that's something that has to be done.
Thank you, Councilmember Snell.
I came tonight, understanding that the pipeline, the Dominion pipeline, has an impact on the folks north of Brandon Drive and not on the folks south of Brandon Drive. I was of the opinion that I'm okay with a different treatment for north of Brandon Drive versus south of Brandon Drive, given the nature of that impact of that easement. But I do think, I like the consistency of the park strip, but that wasn't such a concern for me. I certainly understand why there would be some of the residents there who would rather have the easement moved as far out of their property as possible. That I totally understand. It just looks like more of the residents in the area would rather have the easement stay where it's at and have some type of, because I think that the ultimate, in my discussions with the neighbors and others, and from the input tonight, the ultimate concern among the neighbors is that buffer and having the ability to have the tree line that will buffer that. And I've spoken with Cole about this, and I think for relatively, certainly low maintenance for the Parks and Rec staff for that park strip, all along, all the way from Old Mill down to south of down to the Old Mill Village, where that begins. Along this stretch, I think there's for fairly minimal cost, we can get that done, and I think Cole's even willing to work with the neighbors on what trees could go in there and selecting those, and not necessarily would they be able to determine exactly what it is, but working with them on figuring out what are some reasonable accommodations there. And so I think the hybrid solution is the best of all worlds at this point. So,
thank you very much, Councilmember Adams. Did you have a brief comment?
Does anyone on north or south want 50% of the park strip? Cole, I imagine 15 foot for you is quite a bit to maintain. Does anyone want 7.5 feet of that? And then, yeah, leave the pipe, but we actually offload some overhead maintenance. Would it be all right if we got staff opinion, Mayor, on that overhead? Because that's really out of uniformity on the south side. When you come into the next HOA, it's right back to a standard park strip. So that big 15-footer, I mean, I know some people don't want it, but if...
Cole, do you want to answer that?
It's a lot of maintenance.
It is a lot of maintenance, but if we're looking at it from an arborist perspective, we would prefer the 15-foot growing. It just allows a little bit of diversity as far as where you can plant, you can alter, you can stagger. So from an arborist perspective, we like them a little bit bigger.
So, can we put the berms in too? I'd like the berms.
Yeah, so we have
I'll just say to kind of disparage us as a council, I made a comment earlier about, other groups might come and say, hey, why'd you do that for them? I'm wrapping up.
You actually don't have any time.
Well, you gave me the floor to finish.
I told you if you wanted to ask a question and if he could answer, and I said yes, and you're going on to something else, but yes, please, wrap it up.
All right, thanks. No, we have an agreement. We have a 10-year-old agreement, and we're going to take the word of you two. I'm going to take you two's word, the two that testified of it, that is there. And if we ever need to go and get it to show somebody, hey, we're just upholding what was done 10 years ago. Well,
all right.
You guys have one issue to focus on. We have many. So the agreement's there. I think we're integrable as a council, and we're more integral to uphold it.
Thank you. All right. At this point, we have a substitute motion, and a second, and I will call for a vote. Councilmember Adams.
It's the hybrid, right? Aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Thank you. Voting is unanimous. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate the discussion. Next on our agenda is Shadow Crossing Phase 3 Subdivision Acceptance of Improvements. Mr. Thompson. Andy.
Isn't it time to eat?
Or Lyle.
This is subdivision out just west of Angel Street, a little bit south of 2nd North. It's highlighted here in yellow. Those improvements have all been installed, inspected by our Public Works Department, recommended for acceptance. No outstanding or significant issues here, so we'd recommend the normal 10% 1-year warranty.
Thank you. Any clarifying questions from the council? Hearing none, I would welcome a motion.
Motion to approve, Mayor.
I'll second it.
Motion by Councilmember Adams and a second by Councilmember Lee for approval. Does council have the opportunity to ask or to make any final statements? Would any of you care to exercise that opportunity?
Just to clarify that it includes the standard warranty and amount and period.
Thank you. I guess it's a good point of order. Does that include 10% warranty, Councilmember Adams, as part of your motion?
Yeah, I don't went without saying.
Okay.
It's fine.
All right. Same thing, Councilmember Lee. Okay. Anybody want to exercise your opportunity for additional comment? Hearing none, Councilmember Lee, will you start a vote, please?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Voting is unanimous. Next, is there someone here from Perry Homes? I was just going to say thank you.
Stalwarts.
Next item on our agenda is final plat approval for the Hilton Homes subdivision, 289 North, 700 East.
Mr. Hilton owns some property at about 700 East and 300 North. It's highlighted here on the map. One existing home there. They would like to split that property into 3 lots. We reviewed the preliminary plat recently. Existing home on the corner, a lot to the south and one to the west. Well, all those lots conform with the zoning in the area. This is the final plat. It's now been submitted, found acceptable by staff, and it's been recommended by the Planning Commission for final plat approval.
Thank you. Does that conclude your report? Council, any Yes?
Yeah, I can't think anything else to say about
Okay,
this one.
well, we won't fault you for that. Any clarifying questions from the council? Hearing none, I would welcome a motion.
Yeah, I'll motion, I'll move that we accept a Hilton Homes subdivision final plat.
Second.
Thank you. A motion by Councilmember Page and a second by Councilmember Snell for approval as outlined. Does anybody want to take an opportunity to comment on this item? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. Councilmember Snell?
Aye.
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 Thank you. The voting is unanimous. Are you Mr. Hilton? Yes. Too bad that wasn't the beginning, huh?
We can go back.
3 hours for that.
We can go back and debate.
Poor guy.
Next item on our agenda is rezone of 41.22 acres of property at 101 South Angel Street from RA Residential Agricultural to Agriculture and R120 Single Family Residential to R1LD Single Family Low Density Zoning District. Mr. Thompson.
This property is located on Angel Street, a little bit south of 200 North on the east side, is highlighted here on the map. As you heard, the property is requested to be rezoned to R1LD. If you look at it on the zoning map, it's currently primarily R120. A couple of the lots up front are RA from previous rezones. Obviously, this is with the intent of future development. As you're aware, the R1LD meets the 2-unit per acre requirement of the general plan. They requested this to allow a little more flexibility in the lot size. They have submitted a concept drawing showing what could be done there. Again, this is not for preliminary plat approval tonight, just a concept. Under this concept, the lots, the smallest lot is well over 13,000 square feet. Most of them are in the 15 to 20,000 range. It's very compatible with the property to the north. As far as zoning goes, that, as you're aware, the Mountain Vistas development was done as an open space subdivision. Those lots also range from about 13,000 up to over the half acre. This was reviewed by the Planning Commission. They unanimously recommended approval of the R1LD zone with the caveat that it would take effect only after final plat approval so that they can make sure that the concept plan is carried through to the final plat as far as lot size and density and those kind of issues.
Okay, thank you for your report, Andy. At this point, call for anybody to have any technical questions to clarify.
Yeah, I just have one question. It appears that, well, it's obvious that we don't have even a preliminary plat, this concept design, so it's essentially the very same proposal that we had almost a month ago when we considered this before. And of course, the Planning Commission recommended that this will get to questions. Sorry, the planning approvals contingent upon final plat approval. And I think I'm okay with that concept, but in looking at I just have to say I have just misgivings about the concept plan. And I just wanted to ask maybe you, Andy, are there other ways you could, and the problem I have, I guess, is some of these cul-de-sacs look really long, like sort of really big, and and then they all sort of funnel out to this one road, and there's a lot of
Mr.
homes
Garn,
there.
can you make it a question? Sorry, we're on technical questions. So
the
darn rules.
So the question is, sometimes you need to give context to. So the context is that I don't like this design. So is there another design that would fit this R1LD zone that maybe would not have such long cul-de-sacs and would have maybe more, not just this one outlet road, but a little different?
Yeah, I think the intent of that condition was not that they wanted the subdivision to look like this as far as road pattern goes, but more concerning the lot sizes. And right now all the lots along the existing houses here, they're all, except I think for one as I looked at it, they all tend to be larger lots, up in the 16 to 18,000 square feet with smaller lots kind of grouped in the interior. I think that's the concept they wanted to make sure got maintained through the platting process. That they didn't slam them, 79 12,000 square foot lots and one 6-acre lot on the property, whatever the math works out. Yes, I think we've discussed the cul-de-sacs with the developer already. Be very simple to probably connect this cul-de-sac down to this one, leave a smaller one in the middle. It would make the subdivision flow better, in my opinion. But again, that's what the reason for the condition of rezone effective upon final plat, not to approve this plat per se, but to make sure that the plat's acceptable as far as lot size goes.
Thank you.
Any other technical clarifying questions from anyone?
Did we, I know it's not rule yet, we've talked about it becoming rule and we've applied it in many ways, but did we follow the 500-foot notification?
Yes, that was done for the Planning Commission public hearing. There were a handful of people at that meeting, primarily from this neighborhood here, a couple from across the street to the west. Their concern was compatibility of lot size. At least that's what I understood the concern.
Anything further, Mr. Adams? Okay, I just had a question, or a couple of questions. It looks like the access points, they will obviously tie into Morning Mist Lane there, as well as an access point out onto Angel. We would definitely require that, but that, at least access onto Angel is only allowable right there next, just north of that LDS church. Is that correct? Because is there homes all along the way in the additional properties? I believe they're all existing residences.
Yeah, there are existing homes. Continuously across that property.
So the only access point to Angel would be in that
Angel
area.
is there, as you mentioned. There are 2 stub roads in from the existing Mountain Vista. They also will be required to stub a road to the north for future development and access in that direction.
Okay. Only one other question, because this was brought up in the call to the public tonight. That someone had mentioned that it was his understanding that there were 200 plus lots going into this particular potential subdivision. Would you please address that?
It's 41 acres. That allows for 82 lots as a maximum.
Right. So bottom line is there would be no more, with the R1 LD zone designation, there will be no more home sites, no more building lots in this area than would be if everything was just pure half-acre lots. Correct?
Not exactly, but
I mean,
theoretically,
roughly.
Just you can't fit half-acre lots in and make them all exactly half-acre. So you tend to get a few more lots under the LD zone. Again, this is zoned R120 for the bulk of the property. If they chose to go to an open space subdivision, they could actually get another 8 or 10 lots, another 10% more under maximum density, whether that was approved that way or not. Under a straight R120, it'd probably be a half a dozen or so less, just because of the streets and the configuration in the corners and such factors as that.
I just wanted, for the listening public that's here, and for maybe those who will watch or are watching now, that the zoning designation of R1LD is not going to allow any more homes there than...
It will allow up to 82 lots.
Right.
It's essentially
2 units per acre.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
On a net basis, yeah.
All right. That was the end of technical questions. Yes.
Oh, well, I should leave more often.
And Mayor, at this point, I'll make a motion that we adopt the rezone of 41.22 acres of property from RA and R120 to R1LD.
I'll second that.
Thank you. A motion by Councilmember Snell and a second by Councilmember Garn for approval of the rezone or adoption of the rezone as outlined. At this point, Council, you have an opportunity to add any additional comments. I wasn't here as part of the technical questions, so I'm not really sure how to gauge, but does anybody want to take the opportunity for additional comments? Councilmember Garn, we'll start with you. You each have 5 minutes.
And if it would be all right, I think I'll ask one more question. 82 units. There are some other access points. With those access points, when looking at and I realize this is just a concept plan, but these stub roads won't really change. So you're going to have, and as you mentioned, the only access to Angel Street would be on this one road. 82 units with this concept plan, with the available roads in the existing subdivision and the one road going out to Angel Street. From an engineering perspective, is that a little skimpy or okay, or?
In the short term, it might create a little more traffic than is desirable. Certainly the streets can handle it. It's not a matter of capacity, it's a matter of desirability. In whatever time in the future the road gets pushed through to the north, that will alleviate it. Just for example, if you look at the Mountain Vista subdivision right adjacent to it, it currently only has 2 access points, one at 2nd North and one at Angel. It does have 2 or 3 other stubs, just the ones into this property, there's one at the north and one at the west down here. So again, capacity-wise, it's very capable of handling the traffic. Desirability, it may be a little more traffic than the guy living at the end of the street would prefer to have.
And approximately how many units just have the 2 access points in the Shadowbrook or Shadowbrook Drive?
Mountain Vistas.
If I recall correctly, it's over 200 in that one.
Thank you. That gives me some perspective. But I guess I still have some concerns, and I agree with the Plan Commission's recommendation to make this. And did we make the motion?
Mm-hmm. That was not part of my motion, but
okay. Would you consider amending
yes.
your motion to make it? And I, as the second, would support that. And we do still have that ability to, I guess, even though rezoned, to look at the plat. So, thank you.
Was that an amended motion then?
Yes, to include the stipulation that that is awarded or that transaction occurs upon an acceptable final plat.
Still a second?
Yes.
Okay. And you're done with your time?
Yes.
Councilmember Page?
Okay, no comment. It's pretty clear.
Councilmember Snell?
I have no further comment.
Councilmember Lee?
I don't have any.
Councilmember Adams?
Just a request to the developer in your design, not necessarily pertaining to the boundaries that abut your previous phases. I mean, I know there are different names of subdivisions, right? But it's all Symphony's work, which is great work. But over here on the north, where you abut up to what I'm assuming is half-acre lots, in your design, if you would be, I just, on behalf of the residents, would request a half-acre buffer. There, we've crossed this bridge before. R1LD is stretching a lot of people's feelings out there, but it's legal, it's on the table, great. But if you'd be sensitive to that, we've had that happen before north of you, and it was very painful for the residents who'd been there forever with half-acre or greater. Thanks. I like the concept of keep the density. If you can at least buffer them with that and then jump over to something more dense that fits the zoning, at least they feel at least protected. Thanks.
Thank you. We have an amended motion and a second. We'll go ahead and call for a vote. Councilmember Page?
Aye.
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 Thank you. The voting is unanimous. Next item on our agenda is minutes.
Did we have minutes? I don't have minutes.
I don't either.
Did we have minutes?
Minutes, October 5th.
October 5th. They might be in the updated one.
Oh, yeah. They're there.
They're after the calendar.
Oh, sorry. Out of order.
We'll roll Marie out of order. Oh, no, Marie's agenda. Never mind. Her packet. Council, if you had a chance to, or even if you haven't, if you'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
I'll second that.
Motion by Councilmember Garn and a second by Councilmember Lee for approval of the minutes. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Next item on our agenda, that link didn't. Next on our agenda is calendar. You have before you a calendar council. We would just remind you of the Veterans Day program coming up this week from Saturday at Davis High School, and other community events as outlined. Next item, we have councilman reports. Does anybody have a councilman report they'd like to provide? Just remind you to keep them limited.
Can I just add, make sure that you put on your calendar the Power Commission open houses
Yes.
for both the 14th and
December 5th, wasn't it?
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I think it, yes.
It shows it down at 7 though, doesn't it, on this one?
Yeah, it
Isn't
does.
6 o'clock?
Is that
Yeah,
the regular
6
Power
6
Commission?
o'clock for the open house.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'll just make one comment, maybe some administration item. We had several folks apply for the city attorney position this past week. Myself, Shane, Councilmember Page, Chief Oberg, Dean, and representative from Bountiful City Attorney's Office conducted interviews all day. And we have some great candidates, narrowing it down, and can have some follow-up discussion and likely have something for you either by the next meeting or most likely December. Yep. So. All right. Next on our agenda is consideration of a closed meeting pursuant to Utah Code annotated 524205, strategy session to discuss pending and reasonably imminent litigation. There's only a few times we can go into closed session. This is one of those times. I welcome a motion to move into executive session.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Thank you. Motion by Councilmember Lee and a second by Councilmember Page to move into executive session, which requires a roll call vote. Councilmember Garn?
Aye.
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 Thank you. Voting is unanimous. Thank you, everyone. Is that the default 2-minute?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think so.
Yeah.
I'm hoping so.